Psalm 119. If you want to learn that, Coach Dr. Grant gave a great way of learning that. Pick up the Hebrew and try to follow along the Hebrew while listening to the song, and it'll be like a mnemonic device and probably help you remember it. So all praise to the Most High. That was good though. That was good. Like I like that song. It's in my head now. It's in my head now. So we're gonna read a little Ibrit in a moment. I will share my screen. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to all those that are on Facebook as well as that are in the room, and to those of you who may watch this video later on YouTube, or as some people say, on the YouTube. All praise to the Most High. You should see my screen now. Hold on, all right, we got it. We got business now. We got action. So we're gonna go through some Torah portions today, three of them if we can. Use that raise your hand feature so I can acknowledge you. Hold your questions if you can till we get to the end, at least the end of the slide. But if not, if you can hold them even to the end of that portion, that'll be great. But you can ask questions on any slide. I just want to bring that out. The first Torah portion we're going to talk about is Vayigash, or Vayigash, however you want to say that, right? Vayigash or Vayigash. And he came near. That's what that is saying. And remember, the Torah portions, remember we talked about this before. You usually can get the definition or the meaning of the Torah portion, of the name, excuse me, of the Torah portion directly from the sentence or the verse that word is in. That's usually how they're named, right? You might see a word. So Vayigash. Now, I'm going to lay the background. We left off last Shabbat where Yosef, his brothers did not know who he was just yet. So they had this dinner with him and they were kind of blown away by this dinner. They were eating with this man who at once he was kind of scolding them. He had thrown one of their brothers in prison. It was a lot going on, right? And they was just trying to figure out what was going on because the guy was dealing with them very harshly, they felt like. And they didn't know it was their brother. So we left off last Shabbat where Yosef commanded that the silver be put back in the men's sacks and that his silver cup, so that the silver be put back in the men's sacks and that his silver cup be put in the mouth of the sack of Benjamin. So it was like a setup. It was going to set up like they stole something, right? Then he commanded that the men be overtaken. He's like, when they get a little bit outside the city, y'all go overtake them and charge them with theft. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack, and they had to go back before Yosef. Yosef, when they came back to him, he was going to take Benjamin as a slave only. But Yehuda told him the story of their father, Yaakov, and how he had already lost one son and that he was an old man, and that it would kill him if they returned without Benjamin. So Yehuda offered to enslave himself instead of Benjamin. Quick question before we start. Anybody know why, or can you possibly give a reason why Yosef wanted to take Benjamin as a slave? Anybody give me a reason on that. Why would he want to take Benjamin?
So he could get to know his brother for a little while. He had never seen him.
There you go. It's because Benjamin, they had the same mother, same father. Their mother was Rachel, right? So they had the same mother and father. And I think Benjamin was born before he left, but obviously Benjamin was like a babe, probably a babe at that time, because Joseph was 17. So this had been quite a bit of time had passed, and now he is ruling on the throne as second in command to Pharaoh. So we'll pick it up from Genesis 45 and verse 1. Let me share my screen and we shall dive in, because I'm going to read just a little bit and then we're going to go right back to the only Torah portion I feel like I'm going to dig deep into as far as reading, because we're going to read some chapters. That's in Shemot. So I'll share my screen. This is Bereshit 45 and verse 1. We'll start from there. And then I'm going to stop and we'll go back to the notes. So Bereshit 45 and 1 reads as such in TS 2009. It says, and Yosef was unable to restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he called out, have everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him while Yosef made himself known to his brothers. Now put yourself here for a moment, Mishpachah. I want you to go to this place. And he wept aloud, and the Mitzrites and the house of Pharaoh heard it. And Yosef said to his brothers, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were unable to answer him, for they trembled before him. They were silent. They thought Yosef was dead. They didn't know where Yosef was. They sold Yosef. Now in this moment, he reveals himself to them. Yosef said to his brothers, please come near to me. And when they came near, he said, I am Yosef, your brother, who you sold into Egypt. And now do not be grieved nor displeased with yourselves because you sold me here. For Elohim sent me before you to preserve life. For 2 years now the scarcity of food has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there is neither plowing or harvesting, nor harvesting. And Elohim sent me before you to preserve you for a remnant in the earth, and to give life to you by a great escape. So then you did not send me here, but Elohim did. And he has set me for a father to Pharaoh, and master of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Mizraim. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Yosef. Hallelujah. Elohim has made me master of all Mizraim. Come down to me, do not delay. And you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and be near to me, you and your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. And I shall provide for you there, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, because 5 years of scarcity of food are still to come. And look, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. And you shall inform my father of all my esteem in Mizraim, and of all that you have seen. And you shall hurry and bring my father down here. And he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers spoke with him. It says, after that, his brothers spoke with him. After that, his brothers spoke with him. Ishbakar, put yourself in this place. They did evil to their brother. They sold their brother. As a matter of fact, they was thinking about killing their brother until the alternative idea was proposed. They hated their brother. Remember we read this earlier. It says they hated him. They sold him. Now here is Yosef, a noble man. He was done wrong by his brothers. He ain't seen his daddy in so many years. He just now seeing his brother. He could have held a grudge for all that time, but he chose not to. He dealt with his brothers in righteousness. He said, listen, I know what y'all wanted to do, what y'all planned to do, but man, it wasn't even y'all. The Most High sent me before y'all to preserve your life, to preserve us as a remnant in this earth. That's how I see it now. He put that lens on, not the lens of vengeance on. He put that lens on. Think about that. Selah on that. He could have, if he wanted to, wiped his brothers off the face of the earth, if he wanted to, but that wasn't his heart. All that Yosef had been going through, wrongly imprisoned, falsely accused of rape, sold by his brothers, had to stay in prison, even after he was doing good in prison, even did good to other people, and they forgot about him too. Being neglected. He had to go through all of that, which prepared him for his throne. It prepared him for where he was, so the Most High was taking him. All praise to the Most High. So let's slide over to the notes. Keep your questions, because I know y'all got some. You should see my screen now. So think about this. Now, afterwards, Yosef, he reveals himself to his brothers, right? He explained to them about the scarcity of food in the land. It was going it was going to come, and there was to come during the famine. There's five more years left. He stated that Elohim sent him before his brother to preserve them for a remnant in the earth. He noted that Elohim sent him there, not them. He invited them to come to Egypt, stay in the land of Goshen. He said, bring my father down here. Y'all come stay with me. I'm going to take care of y'all. The brothers had an emotional moment together after this dialogue, and then they came there and told their father, Yaakov. That part I want to read. That part I want to read. Let's go back over here to this part where they go and tell their father what they had done. Because you got to understand, for them to tell their father that, well, let's read it and we'll elaborate on it after that. And they went up out of Mizraim and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. Look at verse 26. And they told him, saying, Father, Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. Look at what it says. Jacob's heart ceased, for he did not believe them. He said, wait a minute, what are you saying to me? What are you saying to me? Because you got to understand something. By them telling him this, they telling him a lot by telling him this. They're also telling them what they did, that they lied to him, that they faked their brother's death. They're telling this man who was grieved, he was so grieved, it said, when he lost Joseph, that nobody could comfort him. It says he refused to be comforted. He mourned for his son. That was his boy. He mourned for his boy. Now they had allowed their father to think that his son, his boy, was dead all these years. They lied to him. It says that Jacob's heart ceased when they told him this. He did not believe them. Can you imagine what he had to process in this time when they told him this? Imagine what it meant.
Froze Moray, just FYI.
It's one of the things about technology, right? Picking right back up where I left off. Zoom just crashed. Can y'all hear me? Let me check first.
And I can hear you now.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes.
Just I'm in the midstream and it just crashed. So we're gonna pick it right back up. The devil don't run nothing in my life. All praise to the Most High. So we're gonna pick it right back up and we're gonna make sure we're going back live. Am I live? I am live still. I'm live now. It says I'm still live. So all praise to the Creator of all things. Hallelujah. So let's keep going. I'm gonna go back to the slide I was on. But one of the things I wanted to put you in this place, this mental space, where you could see where it appears that Jacob, excuse me, it appears that I want to put you in this place where you think also about what it means, what this conversation was like. It's a hard conversation, y'all. Yeah, this is different. This is different. They come in and tell their father that their brother, who has been gone for over a decade, who's been missing, who's been gone for a long time, they're telling their father that we lied to you, pops. Dad, father, we lied to you. And can you imagine that conversation? See, we get pieces of it in the biblical text, and we have to use the insight that the Most High gives us. This is obviously not an easy conversation. This is their father. And in that regard, now they're speaking to their father about an evil act that they did and a grief that they caused him for many years in his life. And now they're asking him to go with him. Joseph is calling for you. They asking for he's calling for you, Father. So this is where we pick up in that conversation. I'll pull back up your better sheet real quick, and you should see my screen. I don't know what's going on with the computer, but I'm good. I think y'all can see everything now. it says, and they told him, saying, Yosef is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Mizraim, and Jacob's heart ceased, for he did not believe them. But when they spoke to him all the words which Yosef had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons which Yosef had sent to transport him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. So they had brought fruit. Remember how they were sent back. If I slide up a couple of verses, look at what Yosef did. The sons of, here it is, verse 22. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. He gave them new clothes. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. He hooked his brother up. And he sent to his father this: 10 donkeys loaded with the best of Mizraim, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and food for his father for the journey. Take care of my daddy. Bring my father down here. So he sent his brothers away, and they left. And he said to them, do not quarrel along the way. Because they gonna, you obviously that's a journey they gotta take. They gonna talk to each other. Man, bro, we didn't know Yosef was still alive. He said, don't quarrel along the way. Go get my father, bring my father down here. And they went up out of Mizraim and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Yosef is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Mizraim. Jacob's heart ceased, for he did not believe them. But when they spoke to him all the words which Yosef had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons which Yosef had sent to transport him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived, and Yasharal said, enough, my son Yosef is still alive. Let me go and see him before I die. He ready to go see his boy. All praise to the Most High. When we read these accounts, that's why I say these ancient scrolls, you had to try to put yourself there. As I mentioned before, this conversation that these men had to have with their father is not an easy conversation. There was a great level of circumspection that had to also occur in these men. They had to now go and fess up. They had to now rise to noble character to even come to their father and say what they were saying to their father, that they had done this to their brother, that they had done this to him. They were now having to come and fess up about this. All praise to the Most High. I'm going to share my screen. We'll dive in from there, from the notes. You should see it. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. So I bring this up because this is going to lead us into, when we get to the end of this Torah portion as well, it's going to lead into a discussion. Imagine a conversation like I said. So Elohim spoke to Yasharal, Jacob, in the night, right? And informed him not to be afraid to go down to Egypt. So he had a dream. He had a vision. For he was told by Elohim that he would make him a great nation while there. So Elohim told Jacob that he was going down to Egypt with him, and that he would bring him up again. All the beings from the house of Jacob who went to Egypt were 70. When Jacob and the family get there, Yosef goes to meet with his father in Goshen. You can imagine this encounter with his father, right? Jacob meets with Pharaoh, and Yosef settled his father and his brothers in the best of the land. Yosef was very wise in his dealings. He bought the entire land of Egypt for Pharaoh, except for the land of the priests, due to the scarcity of food and the Mitzrites selling their fields. So they began to sell their fields, right? Because nobody was plowing in that regard. They sold their land. And Yosef, it says, was very wise in all his dealings. He bought all this real estate. Yasharal dwelt in the land of Goshen, and they were fruitful and increased exceedingly. Yasharal called Yosef to him when the time for him to die drew near, and he made Yosef promise not to bury him in Egypt, but to bury him with his fathers. That also is a very powerful encounter that you see in Bereshit chapter 46. This is when you read the text, and see, this is what I like to bring out. When we was talking about reading the Bible, and then, you get to a place where you study the Bible as well. It's going to start off with reading for some, right? 46. So I want to go to the place where Jacob and Yosef reunite. Hallelujah. All praise to the Most High. So it says, Yosef made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Yisrael, or Yasharal. And he appeared to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. And Yasharal said to Yosef, now let me die, since I have seen your face, that you are still alive. Yosef said to his brothers and to his father's household, I am going up to inform Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. All praise to the Most High. That's a very intimate passage of scripture. Very intimate passage of scripture. You know, there's a lot there in that verse, the 29 and verse 30, where it says he fell on his father's neck and wept on his neck a long time, right? You can imagine what that encounter was like. You can imagine that, right? All praise to the Most High. Now, the Haftarah, according to this Torah portion, was Ezekiel 37:15 through 28. Now, Ezekiel has a vision about the valley of the dry bones, which represents Yisrael. He prophesies of the two sticks becoming one, representing the two houses of Yasharal being reunited, and they will have one shepherd over them in their own land. This shepherd will be Yahusha HaMashiach. We know about that prophecy. Now, before I go into let's go now to the book of Luke. Now, if you look at the book of Luke in chapter 24, this is the Basora that is part of this Torah portion. So you got the Basora, you got the Torah portion, you got the Haftarah, and then you have the Basora. So you have all three of these working together, or they have linked them together, rather. In Luke 24, Messiah had risen, and Miriam and Johanna had gone to the tomb. This is after he had risen. But he was not there. Two men spoke with them and asked them why they sought the living among the dead. But they told them that he had been raised up. They told the emissaries, but they did not believe the report. But Kepha ran to the tomb and marveled at what he saw, the linen wrappings lying by themselves. Two of them were headed to the village, Emmaus, and while they were talking, Yahusha HaMashiach joined them, but they did not recognize him in that moment. He explained to them in all the scriptures the matters concerning himself, beginning at Moshe and all the prophets. They urged him to stay with them, and he did. And after blessing the bread, he gave it to them, and then their eyes was open, but he was gone. Now, when we know the prophecy, well, I keep reading before I go to the question slot. They went back to Jerusalem after they had this encounter with Messiah as they was walking with him. They didn't know he's Messiah until they broke bread with him and then he left, right? So they went back to Jerusalem and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, right? And they told them what had happened, how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. Then that's when Yahusha HaMashiach appeared to all of them. After showing himself to them, they still did not believe. So he took fish and a honeycomb and ate it in their presence, for they thought they had seen a spirit at first and they were frightened. So he reminded them of the words that he had spoken to them while he was with them, about how all had to be filled that was written in the Torah of Moshe and the prophets and the Psalms concerning him. So he opened their minds to understand the scriptures and told them that he was sending the promise of the Father upon them, the set-apart Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and that they were to remain in Jerusalem until they were clothed with power from on high. He led them out as far as Beth Anya, and he lifted up his hands and blessed them, and then he was taken up into the heaven. Now, notice how Messiah revealed himself. He is the true shepherd mentioned in Ezekiel that will rule over Yasharal. So if we go back to the prophecy in 37, this is the Valley of the Dry Bones prophecy. When you read this prophecy, you can see that this is clearly talking about Yasharal or Yisrael. And these two sticks, they're going to become one. Now remember, there was a promise made to Jacob when his sons came, and remember his sons had lied to him at first about his son's death, Joseph's death. They now had to come back and tell him that, hey, Father, we lied to you, right? We lied to you. Joseph is alive. He's ruling in Egypt. It says that he had a dream in the night. And I'll show you this dream because now it'll make the prophecies relate that we just read about in the other passages. So you'll see in this dream here, if I slide up in this same chapter, it said Yisrael set out with all that he had and came to Beersheba. 45. This is it right here. Yisrael set out with all that he had and came to Beersheba. This is where they at. They're in Beersheba. And slaughtered slaughterings to the Elohim of his father Yitzhak. So he did an offering here. They on their way traveling to Egypt. It says Elohim spoke to Yisrael in the visions of the night, and he said, Yaakov, Yaakov. And he said, here I am. And he said, I am the Elohim of your father. I am the Elohim of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Mizraim, for I shall make you there into a great nation. I myself am going down with you to Mizraim, and I myself shall certainly bring you up again and let Yosef put his hand on your eyes. So he has a dream that he's going to be made a great nation down in this place. So all praise to the Most High. So I wanted to relate those things first before we go into the discussion, and then we'll go to the second Torah portion. So as I share my screen once again, hopefully this does not crash on me. So I'll share my screen once again, and then Mishpachah, let me know if you have any questions. Let me first let it play out, because we did the Haftarah, we did the Besorah, we also did the Torah portion, and now we do the questions slide. So any questions on this Torah portion, this particular Torah portion? Or what did you get out of this when you read this? I'm so glad y'all did y'all homework. This is fantastic. Y'all already read. You're good to go. Coach Marcia, come on with it.
Oh, I just wanted you to explain or say a little something about reconciliation, because I figured that has a lot to do with the reading and what happened with Joseph and his brothers, the power of reconciliation, forgiveness, and things like that. Because sometimes it's very hard to let go, to forgive. And I know that I question myself, would I have been able to do that? Would I have forgiven them? When I do these readings, I question myself. So
That is a great great thing that you bring out, Koti. And that's what the Torah portion is supposed to do as well. As one of the things it's supposed to do is where you you be circumspect with yourself. You examine yourself, right? So you think about, could I have done that being in that situation? That's a very hard question. Reconciliation is indeed it's a blessing, and it takes two parties to reconcile. Sometimes it might take one party a little bit more strength to reconcile. In this case, we see the nobility, the noble character of Yosef, where he chose not to hold a grudge against his brothers. He could have. Think about this now. Yosef was number 2 in Egypt. Can you imagine what his lifestyle was like? It says that when they brought him out of the dungeon, they put a gold chain on his neck. They put the king's ring on his finger. They came right off of Pharaoh's hand, put it on his hand, put a gold chain on his neck, changed his garments, gave him a wife. Now he royalty. In one day, he's made royalty. So he lived like that for years. Then he has an encounter with his brother. So he used to this lifestyle of everybody catering to him now. But it didn't get to his head though. Remember, I told you what he had been through, and this prepared him for the position that the father was about to put him in. This man was wrongly in prison. He was accused of rape falsely. You understand what I mean? He had gone through all of this. People had neglected him, forgot about him. He was in the dungeon. And now he was in the penthouse. So for him to have this shows you the spirit of the Most High working in Yosef. That he immediately talked to his brothers and said, hey, that when he told them that it wasn't you that did this to me, the Most High sent me before you, that can be likened to him understanding. He had already had these thoughts. This is the part we don't see, right? He had already been thinking about this. He had already had some thoughts about this. I mean, it was you that put me in this situation. It was you that brought me forth. You sent me forth. Now I see the picture. I didn't understand it before, but now I see. He's now seeing some of the answers to his prayers, probably. His questions that he may have had in his prayers. Now he's seeing some of these answers. So now when he tells his brothers, hey, listen, y'all didn't do this. What y'all did was evil. Y'all meant for evil, but the Most High meant it for my good. He had me in his hands the whole time. So his perspective had already changed where he could interact with his brothers. He can now interact with them in love. He ain't got no vengeance on his heart anymore. That's been removed from his heart. Come on, somebody. So reconciliation is key, and forgiveness is not an easy thing. I'm not in any way trying to imply that forgiveness is easy. What I am trying to highlight is in order to get to a place of forgiveness, one must spend time with the Creator. It's only the Father that's going to be able to give you or give us what we need to forgive a person. Some things, as we can imagine, are way harder to forgive than other things. right? You can just imagine what that scale looks like. There are a lot of things, a lot of places where people have been wronged. People have had things taken from them. People have had people taken from them. People have been killed. You understand what I mean? I'm not saying forgiveness is easy at all by any means. What I'm saying is that only getting before the Father, which we can reasonably assume that Yosef did. He was a man of the Most High. He kept the Most High. He kept the Most High's word close to his heart. He had a relationship with the Creator. Remember when we can assume that he did it, so obviously it prepared him to be in a place where he could forgive and not bring down vengeance on his brothers when he could have done so, and nobody would have even known about it. He could have wiped them off the face of the earth, but he didn't. He esteemed his brothers, as a matter of fact. He said, "Come live with me. I'm gonna take care of y'all. Y'all gonna live in Goshen. Come on, I'm gonna let you meet. I'm gonna take you to meet Pharaoh. Y'all gonna be living in the best." You understand what I mean? He took care of his family. He took care of his brothers. It takes a certain type of man or a certain type of woman to be able to go through what Yosef did and still be unscathed or unsullied by the trauma that he experienced or she experienced. That's very powerful. Yosef was a man after the most. He was a man that loved the Most High. Remember what he said to Potiphar's wife? He says, I'm not going to do this great sin against Elohim. He was thinking about Elohim. I'm not trying to lay with you. You're not my wife. You're another man's wife. I'm not trying to lay with you. I don't want to do this great sin against Elohim. We went over that before in a previous passage. That shows you where his mind and his heart was. Like, nah, I'm not trying to get with you. It says he fled from her. He got away from her. And if you read some of the other texts, it even outlines the extent of how thirsty she was. I just say it like that. She pursued him strongly, Mishpachah, and he refused her. She was persistent, and he constantly refused her. And he said, "This is my reason," pretty much, that he has a love for the Most High. So reconciliation and forgiveness. Forgiveness is something that if you still got a grudge, so this is where we examine ourselves, right? The Torah portion helps us do this. If we are still holding grudges, these are things we can bring to the Father. Can you imagine what Joseph's prayer life was like when he was in prison? He might have, this is my own, I'm just putting in my own color here, but he could have been thinking like, thinking to himself, like, what did I do? What did I do to deserve this? Like, my brother sold me. I'm in prison now. This lady didn't accuse me of rape. Man, what's going on in my life right now? Right? Can you imagine his prayers, right? To get to a place of forgiveness, if you holding a grudge, your prayer life has to change. You have to become transparent with the Father about the grudge. Bring the grudge to him. Let him give you the power to forgive. Because again, like I said before, it is not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy by any means to forgive. So when we talk about things in terms of reconciliation and forgiveness, it takes intimate time with the Creator to get to that place of reconciliation or forgiveness. You cannot do it on your own. All praise to the Most High. You got to have something higher. I'm not against therapy. I'm not against that. What I'm saying is your place of forgiveness and reconciliation, it's got to go above that. You have to depend on something or someone other than a human to get to that place. I'm not saying that therapy is not helpful. I'm not against therapy. I'm just bringing this out. You have to have a relationship with the Creator to get to the place of true forgiveness. Aki Daniel, go ahead, my brother.
Shalom, Mishpachah. And also I see this as we know that Yosef was a powerful man. And we know the Maleka wasn't the only beautiful woman in the kingdom. And I'm sure over time that there were many, many, many beautiful Hebrew women throughout the kingdom. And he humbled himself and he circumcised his heart to lust, not to take advantage of those women. And so as what he was probably strong, not probably, we can see that he was strong enough to even withstand the queen once in her presence. I believe it was a culmination of more than just, and also, of course, his reverence for Yah and his fear for Yah, But with him being a powerful man, and we know how beautiful our Hebrew women are, I'm sure that there were beautiful women all throughout the kingdom, and he built up that strength over time through his reverence of Yah, not to allow the queen to overtake him in his lust. If I make sense.
No, Torah. I think Yosef's character is profound. To be honest, it's a profound character, and that type of character is developed. He already had the heart for the Most High, and we see that even through his youth. It says that even his father kept his words when he was telling the dreams. His father held on to his words. But I bring this out because obviously his character is a pristine type of character. It's a rare character in today's world. It's period. It's a rare character, period. But this man was a noble man. All praise to the Most High. To get that kind of character is developed. It's in you, and then it's developed as well.
Time already. That's what I was saying. It was developed. Yeah.
So all praise to the Most High for, when we see an example like this in the Torah, we look at ourselves. It naturally makes you look at yourself. Like, where are you? Where am I? Because nobody knows what they would do in that situation. People will say, oh no, I would have forgave my brothers too. You have no idea what you would have done in that situation. None. That's why I say you have to be real with yourself. You have running water, computers, lights, you got all kind of stuff going on in your life. But if you was living in that time and you was traveling in that time in those ways and you was accustomed to that culture, going through the things that you went through, could you imagine, you know what prison was like back then? Come on, somebody. You understand what I mean? Can you imagine that, being in a hole, your brother's waiting on you to die, and they pull you out the hole and sell you to somebody? You don't know what you would have done. That's why I say when we read these accounts, what we must do is try to put ourselves in that place so we can understand. But none of us know what we would have done. And when I read these accounts, I don't come from a condemning way on my ancestors, if you know what I mean. Because like I said, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. None of us do. What I do is, like it says, these things were written for aforetime for our learning. So we learn. Let's proceed. Let's keep going. Because we're still talking about Yosef, but we're going to end the book of Genesis with this Torah portion, and we're going to go to the next Torah portion. I think I only got, 3 slides in this one? I think so. So this is Better Sheet 47, and it goes all the way through 50 and 26. So remember, Yosef, he speaks to Pharaoh. He brought 5 of his brothers before Pharaoh. They state that their occupations are shepherds. Pharaoh grants them the best of the land, and they dwelt in Goshen. Yosef also brings his father Yaakov before Pharaoh, and Yaakov states that he is 130 years old. Yosef gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, and the best of the land as Pharaoh had commanded. Yaakov lived in the land of Mizraim 17 years. So the length of Yaakov's life was 147 years. Yasharal called Yosef to him when the time for him to die drew near. He made him promise not to bury him in Egypt, which I mentioned before, but to bury him with his fathers. So Yaakov had this encounter with Yosef, right? He has this encounter with him where he's taking his boys to get blessed. Now, he tells him that Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born to Yosef in Egypt, they now belong to Yaakov. This is why you see Yosef, when he's listed in the genealogy, you'll see Ephraim and Manasseh listed. So this encounter happens. This encounter happens in Egypt. So he says, and actually we can read this encounter in a moment, but he tells them that Ephraim and Manasseh were born to Yosef in Egypt. He says they now belong to me. As Jacob tells them, they now belong to me. He tells them that the offspring that he brings forth after them, they belong to you, Yosef. And to let them, Ephraim and Manasseh, be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. So hopefully that makes sense now, because when I show you that chart, you'll see Ephraim and Manasseh on that chart. This is where this comes from from my understanding. Ephraim and Manasseh, they are to be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. So he tells Yosef about the death of his mother as well, how Raquel had passed. Yasharal then blesses the two sons. So I go back to something I said before. Yosef was not there when his brother was born, because right here, Yisrael is telling Yosef about the death of his mother Rachel. Yasharal then blesses the two sons, Ephraim the younger with his right hand, and Manasseh the elder with his left hand. And he says, let my name be called upon them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them increase to a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now, if you read this encounter, you will see that Yosef tried to correct his father. And like, wait, Dad, you can't put the right hand on the younger. You need to put the right hand on the older. But he says, nah, he did it like that for a reason, as he was led to. One can conclude. Because Yosef saw this, right, and he was troubled by the hand position of his father. He tried to correct him. He wanted his father to put his right hand on the head of the firstborn, which was Manasseh. But his father refused. He told him, I know, my son, I know. He also becomes a people, and he also is great. And yet his younger brother is greater than he. He said his younger brother is greater than he, and his seed is to become the completeness of the nations. So he put Ephraim before Manasseh. So Yasharal tells him that Elohim will be with him and bring him back to the land of his fathers. He gave him one portion above his brothers. He gave Yosef one portion above his brothers. So Jacob tells him that Elohim will be with him and bring him back to the land of his fathers. So he tells him that they're going to go back to Canaan, land of Canaan. So then he calls all of his sons, and this is the part I wanted to get to right here. So he wanted to declare to them what would befall them in the last days. Starts off with Reuben. Reuben, firstborn, Jacob's power in the beginning of his strength. He said he would not excel because he defiled his father's bed. Anybody know what this is referring to?
When he slept with one of his concubines, was Bilhah?
Cain, that is correct. He defiled his father's bed, and his father heard about it. And now you can see where he is telling him what is going to happen in that regard. Shimon and Lewi, he said their weapons are implements of violence, and to let not his being enter their council, nor his esteem united to their assembly, because they killed a man and lamed an ox in displeasure. He cursed be their displeasure, he said, and he divided them in Jacob and scattered them in Israel. I don't know why I got numerous typos in there. Anybody know what is being spoken about here? It says they killed a man. When did Shimon and Lewi kill a man? Anybody remember what happened? Somebody remember what happened? Because y'all did your reading. That's correct. Dr. Grant, go ahead.
In Shechem, over their sister Diana.
That is correct. They killed a man, and it caused Jacob great trouble. As a matter of fact, it caused him great trouble. Let's keep going. Let's look at the next. Who's next in line? Anybody know who's next in line? Reuben, Shimon, Lewi? Who's next? Never mind. I got it right here on the screen. Judah. He said that his brothers praise him. His hand is on the neck of his enemies, and his father's children bow down to him, referred to as a lion's cub. He said, the scepter shall not turn aside from Yehuda, nor an inscriber from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Says that he washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. That one thing you do see about Judah, you do see his nobility as well. You start to see him stand up, right? Where he says, nah, he considered he was going to go in slavery rather than his brother. He was the one also that told his father, he says, if Benjamin don't come back, then, let it be on my head. So he served as a guarantor for bringing Benjamin back. That's why he stepped up when Joseph was wanting to take Benjamin as his own slave. But obviously we can assume that he was not going to enslave Benjamin, but he was like, nah, I'm gonna keep him as my slave. That's when Judah stood up and said, nah, sir, I can't go back without my brother. It's gonna kill my father. So you could take me instead. So you can start to see the nobility in his character start to arise as well. Zebulun says that he dwells at the seashore. He is a haven for ships, and his border is unto Zidon. Yisakar says that he is a strong donkey lying down between two burdens. He says that he saw that a resting place was good and he became a subject to slave labor. Dan says he is a serpent by the way and he bites the horse's heels so the rider falls backward. Gad, he is described as a raiding band but he raised his heel and a band raids him but he raised his heel. My apologies for all these typos. I was typing a little too fast probably. He says that bread from Asher is rich. Asher, right? He says bread from Asher is rich and he gives delicacies of a sovereign. Naphtali, he says that he is a deer let loose and he gives words of elegance. Yosef, he says that Yosef is an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree by a fountain and that his branches run over a wall. He says that he has been shot at and hated, but his bow remained in strength and that he was made strong by the hand of the mighty one of Yaakov. He says the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors, up to the limit of the everlasting hills. They are on the head of Yosef and on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers. Benjamin, he says that he is a wolf that tears. In the morning he eats prey, and in the night he divides the spoil. So Yasharal tells them to bury him with his fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, the land of Canaan. Abraham bought this field with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial site. There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Yitzhak and Ribkah, his wife. And there Yasharal buried Leah. When Yaakov ended commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Now, Yosef wept over his father and commanded the physicians to embalm Yasharal. Embalming was a practice in what nation? Anybody know? Where did that practice of embalming come from?
Ibrahim.
That's correct, in Egypt.
Egypt.
40 days completed for embalming, and they wept for him 70 days. Yosef informed Pharaoh that he wanted to keep the oath he made to his father, and he went and buried him in the land of Canaan. So he went up with all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Mizraim, and all the house of Yosef and his brothers, and his father's house. Only the little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in Goshen. So Yosef's brothers, they feared him that he was going to pay them back. And he told them, he said, listen, y'all intended evil against me, but Elohim intended it for good, in order to do it as it is this day, to keep a great many people alive. And now do not fear. I provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And Yosef lived 110 years, and he saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. Yosef told his brothers that Elohim would certainly bring them up out of the land of Egypt to the land that he swore to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and he made them swear to bring his bones up from Egypt as well. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Mizraim. So all praise to the Most High. All praise we give unto the Creator of all things. The Haftarah for this portion was 1 Kings 2, 1 through 12. This is when Dawid was nearing his transition, and he commanded Shlomo before he died. He told him to guard the charge of Yahuwah Almighty and to walk in his ways, and his commands and his right rulings, and his witnesses as is written in the Torah. Now remember this though, he reminded him that Abba Yahuwah would establish his word which he spoke concerning Dawid, saying, if your sons guard their way to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their being, saying there is not to cease a man of yours on the throne of Israel. He also gave him instructions to how to handle certain affairs regarding men that were his enemies and those who showed him love. This was before he passed. So we see in Bereshit where Yosef is giving instructions to his sons, Yisrael is giving instructions to his sons. And then we see also in the book of Kings, 1 Kings, where David is giving instructions to Solomon before he takes the throne. Dawid slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of Dawid. He reigned over Israel for 40 years, 37 in Hebron, 33 and 3 in Jerusalem. The rest of the chapter expounds on Shlomo firmly establishing his reign, sitting on the throne of his father. My apologies for all these typos. I'm looking at 37 and 33. Obviously, it's way more than 40 years. In the book of Yochanan, John 13, we see Messiah washing the feet of his disciples, following the supper, right? Which some may refer to as the Lord's Supper. but we know they were having the Pesach. This was before the Pesach, knowing that his hour had drawn near. And in this event, he teaches them what it means to love one another, giving them an example of how. He reveals that one who serves in love will follow his example. And later in this chapter, he says, by this all know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So with that, I'll go to the questions on this one as well. One thing I want to highlight, when you look at those prophecies, why y'all ask me this? I'm looking at this question now in the chat. Okay. All praise to the Most High. This is the type of discussion I want to have. So let's have this discussion not in the chat, but openly. So all praise to the Most High. I do want to highlight some principles we see, or a major principle that we see. The heart posture is very key. The Most High has always been after the heart. When you look at the heart of men, right? Sometimes men, there's a nature in men. When I say men, I'm saying mankind, that is against the Most High because it's evil. There's an evil nature in all of us. Now, we have to acknowledge that, and then we also have to do something about it. We have to get rid of it. We see in these, when we look at the life of Yosef, which is a very profound account, it's a very profound record. When we look at his life, we can see how this man was draped in esteem, nobility, a character that was pristine, that was like, he was a gem. This man was a gem. He served to be a gem, not only for his family, but for all kinds of people. He kept all kinds of people alive because of what he went through. He didn't give up. He didn't commit suicide. He didn't kill himself. He didn't hold a grudge to the point where he now wanted to go back and get all of his enemies, even his brothers. He didn't do that. He stayed in the way everlasting. He kept following the Father. So all praise to the Most High. This challenges us to look at our own hearts, right? Even when we witness to others, when we speak to others, right? We do it from a place of humility, right? We do it from a place of trying to relate to the person in love, right? It's not a place of condescension or pointing down on someone or puffing oneself up. It's literally trying to relate to a brother or a sister in love. So with that, I'm gonna yield for a moment to see if there are any questions on this topic, this particular part of the Torah portion. All praise to the Most High. Let us dive in. Let's keep going.
Wait.
Okay.
I don't have any questions, but it made me think about, sir, sorry for the background noise, but it made me think about how, does that mean that Zebulon would be like fishermen, and would Asher, is that why, they would be known as a nation of maybe like people who were good cooks or good chefs, like yourself, Mr. Baker, Maury Aquil? It just made me think about that. And the discussion that we were having in the chat was, someone asked, how come Rachel was not buried in the cave as well? And and my response was that they were on their way back from Laban, on the way after they seen Esau. And I also wondered the same thing. Why didn't they carry her back? And I wonder if it has anything to do with how she had her father's idols with her. And she was actually cursed by Jacob, and he didn't even realize that she would be the one that would be cursed by his words, that whoever had those idols would die, right? And so the response was, well, what happened to Joseph? They carried Joseph and Jacob's body. But I know Joseph's were bones that had been decomposed over hundreds of years when he got taken back to Canaan. And I was thinking that, for Jacob, that was a specific funeral procession from Egypt to Canaan. So Rachel's body, they buried her on the way back to Canaan. Like after she died, she had Benjamin, they buried her there. And I was wondering if it had anything to do with them becoming defiled, or maybe they just didn't have, the wherewithal to carry her on the way back. So, because it was in regard to the question, something that you said about Joseph not being there, because Jacob was telling him about his mother being buried. But if you read, I think it was, what was it? One of those books, I think it was Jasher, that it says how Joseph wept at his mother's grave, and he supposedly spoke to her on his way to Egypt when he was sold. So he had known that his mother was buried. Sometimes how the old folks, they just repeat stories so you don't forget what happened. I think that's what that was. But I don't know why. I often wonder why Rachel wasn't carried to be in that cave as well, and I kind of rationalized it a number of different ways, but I don't know if that's right or not.
No, this a very so Yosef was sold to his brothers, technically in chapter 29, and I think Rachel was buried in chapter 35. So technically, you could take this in a couple of ways, right? For one, I know one of my elders has brought this out to me before. So technically, the Bible is not technically in some of the chapters are not in chronological order, but we do see Rachel dying before Jacob being buried. Excuse me, Rachel dying before Joseph was sold. Now, because Joseph is sold in chapter 37, Rachel dies in chapter 35. That was during the birth. And so it does say Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. So her grave was marked. And the pillar, it was even marked in that time, the way the writer says it in chapter 35. So, like you were saying, Jacob could have been rehearsing the death of his mother to his son Joseph before he died, even though Jacob already knew that his mother was passed. I know what you're saying there. Another thing is, my understanding of this, because when I said it, I think I said it correctly the first time, was that Benjamin was like a babe, so he didn't really know his brother, but his brother was born, but he was sold after that, after his brother was born. So, good point, because that makes me go back and recount what I was saying earlier, because I caught myself in the midst of saying that. I was like, wait, no, she wasn't there. But then as I'm thinking about everything, I'm like, nah, my first understanding was actually correct. He was alive, or excuse me, he did know his brother, but he did not know his brother because his brother was born while he was still at home. But then he was sold after that. So, but yeah, it could be like a recount when he's recounting, he's going back over how, because remember he loved Raquel, and that was his mother, and he's like he ain't seen his boy in a while, so he kind of talking about the stories of him and his mom, and he's just kind of talking to him. It's been a long time since he's seen his son. So that's a good point. That made me go back to remember why I said it in my first understanding. Any other comments, questions on that one? And Rachel's grave was marked. It was just she died on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem, right? And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. So, but any other questions or comments or points on this Torah portion y'all want to bring about before we do the last one? When you think about those prophecies, Akoti, one thing there's definitely some higher meanings in those prophecies on what each tribe would be doing and what they would be, and even where they would be. I try not to get, that's something that would take some real studying out, because I don't want to just by happenstance say, oh, these men over here, they fishers, they got to be from the tribe of, and such and such. I'm like, I don't, because I think when you look at the chart that is pushed out there, I think by, certain groups, that's why I said I'm not sure of the actual chart. And I don't necessarily want to, because I think that it could get into a whole nother area when you start saying, well, now this group of people, this must be this group of people, because the prophecy fit this group of people. But that same prophecy, we don't know if it exactly fits that group of people, or it just fits them today, if you understand what I mean. Yes, it's a lot that goes into that, but it does make you wonder, because you see these certain things. And you were saying something about Asher. You were saying something about Asher, and Asher, the prophecy with Asher says, bread from Asher is rich, and he gives delicacies of a sovereign. That don't mean I'm from Asher because I could bake. But I saw what you did right there. I saw what you tried to do. All praise to the Most High. Let's keep going. Everybody good on this Torah portion? Before I go to the last one, because y'all got some Hebrew reading to do on this one. Good, fantastic. Let's keep going. This is now the book of Shemot. And we get into the book of Shemot, which is it starts off and very interesting. Shemot, the word means names, technically. That's the plural form for the word names, right? In the Hebrew. So what we're going to do for this one, I want to do this Torah portion a little different. Shemot is both the title for the second book from the scroll of the Torah and the title of the Torah portion, in the first Torah portion in the book of Shemot. Shemot means names, and the English-speaking world calls this book Exodus. The Hebrew title for the book comes from the opening phrase of the book. Now these are the names, Shemot, of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Yaakov. That's Exodus verse 1 and 1. The English name Exodus comes from the Septuagint, also known as the LXX, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. The Greek title for the book is Exodus a Egyptu, which translates as departure from Egypt. Thus today we say Exodus. The name Exodus is an abbreviated form of that Greek title, and it means departure. The book of Exodus tells the story of the children of Israel enslaved in Egypt and their miraculous redemption through the hand of Moshe, the story of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and the construction of the golden calf, and the construction of the tabernacle in the wilderness. As we
Roy,
study, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but is that supposed to be on the screen? What you talking about?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
not on the screen. Not yet. I'm about to get into it, but I'm just kind of laying the groundwork for it first. So as we study this week's reading from the book of Exodus, we find the children of Israel in slavery. Yet Elohim remembers his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? And redeems them, showing his powerful love and faithfulness. And I'm going to share my screen. We're gonna read the first part of this, and then we're going to dive into the actual Torah portion. Now, this Torah portion, as you can see, is quite a few chapters. There are only certain chapters that I'm going to read in entirety, but I want to show you something. It's 6 chapters. Let me share my screen. Something's going on with my mouse here. Here we go. Let's slide over to the book of Shemot. And you should see it. First chapter, it says this. And these are the names of the children of Yasharal who came to Mizraim with Yaakov, each one with his household. You can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
It says Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yissachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all those who were descendants of Yaakov were 70 beings, as Joseph was already in Mizraim. Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation. So everybody's gone at that point. The children of Israel were fruitful and increased very much, multiplied and became very strong, and the land was filled with them. Then a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, see, the people of the children of Israel are more and stronger than we. Come, let us act wisely towards them, lest they increase. And it shall be when fighting befalls us that they shall join our enemies and fight against us and shall go up out of the land. So we can see that the king was afraid of the Israelites. So they set slave masters over all them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh and supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. So we do have markers in history that you can see right here. These are the cities that they reportedly built. The more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. That verse sound familiar? Do that verse sound familiar to you right there? Remind you of any group of people today?
Definitely.
The more they afflicted them.
Yep.
Okay, just wondering, just sounded familiar when I was reading it. They made the children of Israel serve with harshness, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all kinds of work in the field. All their work which they made them do was with harshness. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shipra, and the name of the other was Pua. I think Shipra either means splendid. These names have meaning, though. Don't quote me on the names. I was looking at the names previously, but they are beautiful names. And he says, when you deliver the Hebrew women and you see them on the birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it's a daughter, then she shall live. But it says the midwives, they feared Elohim, and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, and kept the male children alive. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to him, why have you done this and kept the male children alive? And the midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. It says Elohim was good to the midwives, and the people increased and became very numerous. And it came to be because the midwives feared Elohim that he provided households for them. So with that, I'm going to yield and I'll slide back over to this part of the presentation. Now, think about this. Now, we just went through that part right there. That's why I'm not going to read all of this over the screen. But you see something, it says Elohim was good to the midwives. They feared him. And instead of obeying the voice of the king, they obeyed the voice of the Most High. Now, think about that. That's a principle even today that you can implement today. It says the Most High took care of them. It was the threat of death if they disobeyed the king. They didn't. They killed. They said, "Nah, we fear the Most High, so we're not finna kill these young men, these young boys. We're gonna keep these boys alive too." They kept all the children alive, and so even in the face of death, they obeyed the Most High. And look, it says the Most High was good to them, and He provided households for them. So these women were taken care of. Now, Pharaoh, he resorted to commanding the people to throw every son who was born in the river. So he said, if the midwife's not going to do it, then I'm going to tell the people to throw the sons in the river. And this is where you get into the birth of the son of the story of the birth of Moshe. A Levite married a daughter of Lewi. So Moshe was a Levite, right? His father was a Levite, Amram, and he married Jochebed, who was also a daughter of a Levite. She bore Moshe. Reportedly, Jochebed could have been Levi's aunt. Could have been Amram's aunt, or it could have been his sister cousin, female cousin. But we talked about that before in the chat. There's a discrepancy when it comes to the text there about Amram marrying his aunt. Technically, in the Septuagint, from what I've heard, it actually says, it describes her as Doda, which could mean aunt, or could mean, in that regard, in the Septuagint, from my understanding, because that's the Greek, but it could mean, from my understanding, the daughter of his father's brother, which would have made her his cousin, not his auntie. So there's a discrepancy there. But anyway, let's keep going. She hid him for 3 months and then finally built him a small ark. Now, this is his mom. She bore him, she hid him for 3 months, and then finally built him a small ark and put the child in it. His sister, Moshe's sister, stood by to watch at a distance when she did this. Pharaoh's daughter went down to wash herself, her and the women that were with her. She saw the ark, had one of her servants go get the ark, saw the baby and recognized him as a Hebrew, and she had compassion on him. Now, his sister, who was standing by, made herself available and says, should I go call a Hebrew nurse? And Pharaoh's daughter said yes. So she went and called Moshe's mother. She went and called his mother. So Pharaoh's daughter asked the woman, Moshe's mother, to nurse him for her, and she promised to pay her wages. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became Pharaoh's daughter's son. She called his name Moshe because he was drawn out of the water. This is very interesting, y'all. Do y'all see the setup here by the sister and the mother? Do y'all see this? Does anybody else see this? Moshe was born,
Yes.
but it was a decree going out, right? They had to get rid of all the boys. So she hid him, she nursed him, and then I guess she got to a point where she put him in the ark. Pharaoh's daughter sees him. And then Moshe's sister, she's standing by watching all this. Pharaoh's daughter has compassion on Moshe. Say, hey, do you want me to go call a Hebrew nurse? She said yes. She went and called his mother. She went and called Moshe's mother. So Moshe went back to his own household. Do anybody else see this? Or is this okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So he got a chance to be raised by his mom, his family. Then he was put in Pharaoh's house. So I just want to make sure we catching all this, right? Let's keep going. Now, when Moshe was grown, it says he noticed the mistreatment of his Hebrew brothers. He went out, he was living in Pharaoh's house. He went out and about to see things, how they was going on. He saw an Egyptian strike one of his Hebrew brothers. That turned something on in Moshe. Moshe then went and struck the Egyptian and hit him in the sand. The next day, he saw two Hebrew men fighting and tried to intervene, and they spoke to him about what he had done. And he knew, they know what I did. They saw what I did. Because apparently when you read the text, he tried to do what he did in private. Pharaoh heard of the matter and he sought to kill Moshe. So Moshe fled to Midian, and Moshe winds up meeting Reuel. Anybody know who Reuel is?
Jethro.
Zipporah's Jethro.
That is correct. We also know him as Jethro, but that is Moshe's future father-in-law. Reuel means friend of El, friend of all, or friend of God. You can find that in your Strongs. He is given Zipporah, who was Reuel's daughter, as a wife, and she bore him Gershom. Gershom means foreigner. There's a reason she named him Gershom. Over time, the king of Egypt died, and the children of Yasharal cried, and their cry came up to Elohim by reason of the bondage that they were experiencing. Now, with all that in mind, I want to take you over to chapter 3, because this is where we're going to get into some things in chapter 3 before we close out. Now, check this out. I want you to pay attention as we read this account. Pay attention to everything that you see. I'm going to read this. I want you to just pay attention to the wordplay. Pay attention to the words, rather. A man of the, no, verse 3, chapter 3, excuse me. And I'm going to zoom in one more snippet. There we go. That might be okay. Y'all can see that. I made it big for even the people that's on your phone. So Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. Notice where he is. All right. The messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked and saw the bush burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. A messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him. Okay. Moshe said, let me turn aside now and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. And Yahuwah saw that he turned aside to see, and Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe, and he said, here I am. Now, wait a minute. Let's slide back up right quick. Who was in the bush?
Yahuwah.
What does the text say? The text said, who did the text say was in the
A
bush?
messenger.
Oh,
Yahuwah.
and the
That's
messenger
correct.
of Yahuwah.
Then verse 4 says, Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush, right? So this is a principle I want to make sure we understand as we proceed. In Exodus 33, now I'm going to come back to Exodus 3, but I'm going to slide to Exodus 33 because I want to show you something to make a point before we go back. You should see it now. So in Exodus 33, I want to show you something in verse 20. All right. Verse 20 says this. But he said, you are unable to see my face, for no man does see me and live. Okay. So I want to make sure we see that. I'm going to read verse 23. Then I shall take away my hand and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. Okay. Now, I'm bringing this out because I'm trying to lay the groundwork here for something. And I can show you something else in other places, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go there. You even see Messiah talk about no man has seen Elohim, right? Christ himself said that when we even get over to the Brit Kadashah. So I just want to make sure I bring that out, that this is indicating that a representative of the Father is speaking through this representative. It tells us clearly in verse 2, the word messenger right there is malak, which could mean angel, which could be translated as angel in some translations. But the word right there is messenger or malak in the Hebrew. It says Yahuwah saw that he turned aside to see, and Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not come near here. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is set apart ground. Question, where was he at? First verse, where was he at?
Was it Mount Horeb?
That is correct. He was at Mount Horeb, which is known as the mountain of Elohim. So he said, take your shoes off. The place where you stand, you had to set apart ground. And he says, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. And Yahuwah said, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people who are in Mizraim, and have heard their cry because of their slave drivers, for I know their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mizraites, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now see, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Mizraites oppressed them. I want to pause right here for a moment. We see the cry of the children of Israel coming up to the Creator. The cries reach Abba. When the cries reach Abba, you will see instances where he comes and takes a closer look, because now the cries have gotten his attention, so to speak, right? Think about this. In the book of Bereshit, we see something earlier where Sodom and Amorah, they were destroyed. But does anybody remember what happened before Sodom and Amorah were destroyed? What happened? Bereshit 18. I'll slide over there for just a moment, but then we're going to slide back over to Exodus 3. I'm showing you a principle real quick. This is about Abraham. It says, Yahuwah appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre while he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked and saw three men standing opposite him. So he saw three men, it says. Right here it says three men. When he saw them, he ran from the door to meet them, bowed himself to the ground, and said, Yahuwah, if I have now found favor in your eyes, please do not pass your servant by. Notice the interaction. And if I go on down, I'm going to show you this. It says, Yahuwah said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I truly have a child since I am old? Is any matter too hard for Yahuwah? At the appointed time, I'm going to return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah is to have a son. I'm showing you this, and I'm going to go on down to here. Verse 17, it says, and Yahuwah said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Abraham is certainly going to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him, so that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahuwah, to do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahuwah brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Notice who's speaking to him, what it's saying, right? But if up here it says something before, it says it was three men, right? Remember the principle I told you. No man can see Elohim and live, right? So we know by default, rather, and I don't want to say default, but we know by principle that this was a representative of the Most High that has been given assignment to speak for him in this regard. This is a very, and I can show you some in chapter 19. I don't want to confuse you. But I can show you something in chapter 19. I'll show you one verse. Well, I'm going to show you this verse and then I'll show you another verse. Verse 1 says, the two messengers came to Sodom in the evening. Now, wait a minute. Two messengers. Now it's calling them angels. At first it was calling them men. But if you go down here, it says that one man was staying, one of these quote unquote men was staying back talking to Abraham. One of these, let me back out. One of these men was talking to Abraham, right? Right here in verse 17. One of the men continued to talk to him. So the men turned away and went towards Sodom, the other two men, but Yahuwah still stood before Abraham. It's calling this person the father. Well, it's saying Yahuwah in this translation. But again, we know the principle. So we know off top, this is a representative that Abraham is having a conversation with. The very next verse, chapter, first verse, it says, these two men, they are now called messengers. So we now know that those were not ordinary quote unquote men. Those were messengers, Malakim. If we slide on down, before the fire came down, I want you to see what it says in this verse, and then we'll go back over to chapter 3. Verse 24. And Yahuwah rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Amorah from Yahuwah out of the heavens. Now you see that yourself, right? So it's basically saying Yahuwah is in two places. Again, this also just highlights a principle. Obviously, the Father is in heaven. It says Yahuwah rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Amorah from Yahuwah out of the heavens. This person is a representative of Yahuwah in the heavens. And when you look at this in the Ibri, it'll actually show you that when it's saying from, it's talking about directional. It's telling you, when you look at it with the Hebrew understanding, it's telling you the direction of the two. So you see that one is on earth, one is in heaven. And the from here is saying that it is actually coming from heaven. It's coming from above. It has been called down by the one who's standing on earth from the one who is in the heavens. But I'm going to go back over to chapter 3 in better sheet. I just want to show you that principle as we go back. Go ahead, Coach Kirsten, Dr. Grant.
Shalom. I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone watched the Shabbat gathering last week from Ghana, but I mentioned this in my testimony. We met a king in Nigeria, the king of the Owu Kingdom. And man, just that whole interaction was just something else. Anyway, in regard to what you're saying right now about the representative, he had someone standing by his right hand. And that person, so like people came up to greet him and they bowed before him, and it was not a single individual. It was like a group, like the warriors, the women, the chiefs, everybody came together, and there was one person that spoke for them, for the whole group. And then there was also that right hand man who spoke on his behalf. Like he did actually address us, but when the people were coming up to greet him, there was a spokesperson from the group, and then it was his right hand man who was responding to them. Like he didn't respond, like he didn't open his mouth, but his representative, he stood, everyone else sat, but he stood by his right hand, and he is the one that responded. So it was just, kind of seeing things, putting things in perspective in that sense, our King Yahuwah, just from looking at it as a representative on earth of how it works still to this day in certain customs. But it was like, man, it just gave such a different perspective on some of the things that we read about, like his right hand having his power and being able to, and even what you're saying now, that there was someone who is his representative to speak on his behalf, and they are given that power to speak. And they were telling us some of the history, and that was part of what they were saying too, is that, someone speaks on behalf of the king. The king himself does not deal with it. It would, man, y'all have to watch. You have to watch that video of that meeting. But there was like a barrier that you couldn't cross. No one
Yeah.
could go past that barrier to get to the king. Everyone had to bow to the king. Uh, there was, you had to give blessings to the king before you could even say anything to him, to, you know, for your representative of your group. It was just, and what, it was no individual. It was groups of people that addressed the king. But in the point was that right hand man. The right hand man was his mouthpiece. So that's just a small earthly representation of a
Hmm.
shaman principle.
No, that's good. That's good, Coach T. Yeah, I can imagine it was some type of experience. Indeed. And that's what we see in this account, right? You see someone having this authority to speak on behalf of the Father. And all Malakim, there, that's like even the quote unquote man that Jacob wrestled with, that was not an ordinary man. And he didn't even give his name. He had the power to bless Jacob. He had the power to change his name. So when you see these type of things, it's like they stand out. Like, wait, this quote unquote messenger or man is different than these other messenger or men that may be described, right? Because you see some Malakim, they'll give their names. Some Malakim, and then you'll see Malakim resist worship. They'll be like, no, no, don't bow to me, don't bow to me. You see that in the book of Revelation, where the angel told John, no, no, don't bow to me, I'm your brother. He literally told him, no, don't do that. And so, but then you see sometimes where the bow is not rejected, where Joshua saw this quote unquote man at a certain point and he bowed to him. That's in the book of Joshua. We might see that at another point. But yeah, good point, Akoti. Yeah. Now we understand what right hand man means in a different way. Or my right hand. This is the person of your strength. This is the person that's next to you in that regard. Like they take your orders and they make sure that your orders are implemented. The one you can confide in if you are a leader, or the one that has the confidence, or the true can be the spokesperson for the one that he's speaking for in true confidence. You know what I mean? Akoti Marcia and then Aki Daniel.
Yeah, I was taught that this particular script refers to Yahusha, and I wasn't sure whether it was him or one of the, if I have to use the term, big messengers. I'm not Gabriel or whoever, but I was always taught it's Yahusha, his representative. So I'm not sure, but what Kirsten says there makes a lot of sense because it was practiced in my community also, and a lot of things that I see in the script when I'm reading, I put an asterisk and I say culture, 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 whatever is culture, whatever was practiced. And it just brings me back to a lot of things that we used to do at home. And I'm saying, oh my gosh, this is right there in the book. So really, sometimes you cannot even see or meet with the man whom you really want to see, the king, the one who's in charge of the community, the one whom you go dressed up for, and to go to the parade or to go to a great happening, whatever is happening in the community, because that man is not presented. He's in a little house somewhere, a little tent somewhere where nobody can ever go 2 feet or 1 foot close to him. So there's always a representative. So that is really really, really striking, home with that passage right there. So
Yeah.
it's really, we really, when we know the culture, it becomes really easier to understand that book, really.
Torah, Akoti, Torah. Now we're gonna dive in. We about to read some Hebrew in a minute. Danielle, I saw your hand. I didn't know if you still had something to
Uh,
keep.
yeah, I just wanted to point out that just shows the significance something to pay attention to when Yah sends either his representative or like in the scriptures about the Tower of Babel when Yah came off his throne. If Yah is coming off his throne, that's something to be worried about. That's not anything to be excited about. Somebody's in trouble if the Creator comes off his throne, according to how we see the practices with the representative. And so are you.
No, Torah. Yeah, I've done a series before on what I think I titled it Yahusha and the Tanakh. So you can see this quote unquote representative that represents the actual presence of the Father. You see him in the Old Testament, quote unquote Old Testament, before we know him as the Christ, the Messiah, Mashiach, right? Before we know him as Yahushua HaMashiach, we can see him operating in a certain role. From my current understanding, you see him operating in a certain role or a certain position in the ancient books, and then we see him in the fullness of time come in the form of a man in that regard, doing the work of the Father, sent for a purpose of the Father, but by the Father. So just want to bring that out. So yeah, that's a good conversation, Ms. Bakai. Let's jump back in, and then we're gonna read some Hebrew, and I'm gonna see if I got some volunteers on that Hebrew. Verse 7 says, and Yahuwah said, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people who are in Mizraim, and I have heard their cry because of their slave drivers, for I know their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mizrites, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now see, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Mizrites oppressed them. And now come, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Mizraim. And Moshe said to Elohim, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Mizraim? The Father said to him, and he said, because I am with you, and this is to you the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Mizraim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. Where is he at again? Anybody remember? Koti Leah told us, you told us earlier. Horeb.
Horeb.
That's correct. Moshe said to Elohim, see, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the Elohim of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Elohim said to Moshe, I am that which I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And Elohim said further to Moshe, thus you are to say to the children of Israel, Yahuwah, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Yaakov has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance to all generations. Now I'm going to explain these two verses in just a moment. Let's finish this chapter first. Go, and you shall gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahuwah, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, of Yitzchak, and of Yaakov appeared to me, saying, I have indeed visited you and seen what is done to you in Mizraim. And I say, I am bringing you up out of the affliction of Mizraim to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they shall listen to your voice, and shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the sovereign of Mizraim, and you shall say to him, Yahuwah, Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to slaughter to Yahuwah, our Elohim. But I know that the sovereign of Mizraim is not going to let you go, not even by a strong hand. And I shall stretch out my hand and strike Mizraim with all my wonders, which I shall do in its midst. And after that, he shall let you go. And I shall give this people favor in the eyes of the Mizrites. And it shall be that when you go, you shall not go empty-handed, but every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house objects of silver and objects of gold and garments. And you shall put them on your sons and your daughters, and shall plunder the Mizrites. Selah. Look at this verse right here. Every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house. Anybody else catch that? What does this imply?
They were maids, they were slaves, they were servants.
Who was slaves and servants?
The Israelites were slaves to the Mitzrites.
We know that, but we also see something here though. Look at this verse. It says, "Every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house."
Yeah.
Let's slide over to the blue letter right quick. Exodus 3. Let's check something out right quick on that verse. Exodus 3, and let's go to 22. I want to look at this in the Hebrew. Exodus 3 and 22 in the Hebrew. If I pull it up in the Hebrew right at the top of your screen, right here. So it says, every stranger. Right here is gutter, right? So look up this word. This stranger is talking about somebody that dwell with you, right? Somebody that abide with you, right? Somebody that remains or inhabits with you to be, okay? So now, somebody that assembles with you, if you look at the different verb forms, right? Or different forms of the word, rather, excuse me. Now, if I slide back over here, this to me implies that, because it says in her house. Let me see where the word bayit, here he is, right here. All right, so this is banotikhem, benotitechem, daughters is what it's saying right there. But I want to also go to the word house, her house. So yeah, this is bayita. That is correct, bayita. So this is implying that the Mitzrites, you also had, remember there was a mixed multitude that came up, right? This implies that the Israelites had people working for them too. That's what I was getting at as well. But every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house objects of silver and objects of gold and garments. Go ahead, Aki Daniel.
That's one of the things I really didn't want to bring up. We were forced into bondage, but we weren't technically what they would call slaves in Mizraim. We were forced into bondage, acted as slaves, but technically, according to African culture, they weren't slaves, quote unquote. And I'm gonna yield because it's kind of deep to go into.
No, I get what you're saying. I wouldn't necessarily say we weren't slaves. I wouldn't use that terminology because technically when you dig deeper into it, we were, even though we were the majority, it looks like we outnumbered the Mizrahites. We weren't in control and we were oppressed, and they even increased the tail or the amount that we were supposed to do. And they said that we would have to go get our own straw. They wasn't gonna give us straw. Like you, when you get into it, it says they ruled with harshness over it. And they actually had officers that were, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but when you dig into it, you'll see that there were Israelite officers. Well, actually, we're gonna get into it in a moment because they're gonna blame Moshe and Aharon. But I wanted to read this Hebrew first, but we'll get into that part that you're talking about, and we'll
Told
see.
already.
Dr. Grant, go ahead.
So I think what Danielle is talking about is those strangers that were in their house. They
Mm-hmm.
were servants, but they were more like a part of the family. So those were that what you would call, what the Europeans um capitalized or monopolized on, that others, they had people in their homes that, they used that word, but they were just kind of like indentured servants,
You can
or
use that.
those
I get what you're saying.
who owed a debt or
Right.
something such as that, and would live in the home, and they were not to be treated any different than anyone else in the home. And they
They-
were able to rise up into power and that sort of, learn that on the continent too. Man, learn so much. But
that-
yeah, that would be what Ak is talking about.
right, right. So you'll see that we had people that were obviously quote unquote working with us, but also part of the family type of deal, living in the household. That's why I was looking at those words in the Hebrew because it says bayita, meaning it says in her house. meaning this person was a part of her house. It was counted as part of her house. And like you said, it could have been in like in a quote unquote, what we know is today an indentured servant type of deal, or maybe they owed a debt or something like that. But they could have had Egyptian handmaids. Remember, mixed multitude went out now. That's why I keep bringing that out. A lot of people, you had people that were Israelites that left and they went out too. Anybody know who Moshe married? What was she? What was that woman that he took as a wife? Aside from Zipporah,
The Canaanite.
Egyptian woman, not a Canaanite. Egyptian woman, remember? Yeah, I remember where, you remember? And remember his sister got married. Remember, they got mad in that regard.
Sorry.
We'll keep going. Let me keep going. But I'm just showing you the mix of the people there, right? We was there for 400 some years. You better believe it was some mixing going. You know it was some mixing going on, right? And then you got people living in the same households and things like that, right? But we weren't in the position of rulership as far as the government. This makes one think as well, because Yosef was in a royal position, but after his generations passed, how was his position treated then? Was it given back to an Egyptian? You see what I mean? It makes you start thinking about other things. But let's get to this Hebrew, because I want to explain verses 14 and 15 for you. So we read chapter 3 in its entirety, because I wanted to show you the mission. So he gets a mission. Right? And he now has to go to the elders of Israel, and the Most High said that they are going to listen to his voice. Now let's read some Hebrew. The Father reveals his name to Moshe. Now, when you look at this in the Hebrew, this is an excerpt of the Hebrew text in verse 14. It says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, right? And the word Ehyeh is derived from the word Chaya. So Ehyeh, being derived from the word Chaya, it means to be or to become, exist, or happen, right? So now let's slide through the Hebrew. This is what they're saying. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. That's chapter 3, verse 14. I put the meanings up here for you. The words in the blue, this is saying be, shall be, to be, become, or exist, right? The yellow is asher, is who, which, that which, or that, right? So it's like the Most High saying, I am that which I am. I am whatever I will to be. I can be whatever I choose to be, if you get what I'm saying. So when you see this in the Hebrew, it's like the Most High is saying, I am whatever I will to be. I can do whatever I choose to do. I am who I am. I am that I am, right? It may be perceived that Elohim describes his sovereign nature in verse 14. He can do or be whatever he chooses. And he's telling Moshe. Moshe was like, when I go back to him, what shall I tell him? He says, well, tell him. He says, I am that which I am. You can't box the Most High in, is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to describe this with English words. But he is saying that I am that which I am. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Right? And he says, you should tell the children of Israel that Ehyeh, I am, has sent me to you in that regard, right? So now let's bring up the whole verse 14. And then we're going to look at the whole verse 15. So I share it on my screen. We'll go over to the Hebrew and we'll do this chapter. After this, we'll close out. But I wanted to show you this before we close out today. Let me see. How everybody doing? Y'all doing good? Just trying to see if everybody doing good. 3. Let's do 14. Let's do 14 first in the Hebrew. And I'm going to put it on this screen over here. Let me move some things around. And I'll put it in the interlinear Bible so you can see it as well and follow along. And we'll read it in the Hebrew. Now, I'm going to share my screen. You should see it now. Well, wait a second. Now you shall see it. All right, it says this. Vayomer Elohim el Moshe, right? Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Vayomer ko tomar. And he said, thus you shall say, Libne, that is to the sons of Yisrael, Ehyeh shelachani is has sent me, Alekem, to you all. You can say Alekem to you or to you all. All praise to the Most High. So I wanted to show you that. Now, I'm going to go back over here to the presentation and let you see this. Now, on this, we're going to look at verse 15. So we've established that in verse 14, it's like the Most High is letting Moshe know of his nature. I am whoever I will to be. I am whatever I choose to be. I am the Most High. I am that which I am. In verse 15, he gives us his name. Let's read it. Look. Verse 15, it says this. Wayomer, well, I read it like this. Wayomer od Elohim el Moshe. Ko tomar el bene of Yasharal. So that's the first line right here. Wayomer od Elohim el Moshe. That is ben to, tomar, right? So it's saying to the sons El Bene Yisrael, to the sons of Ishmael, Yisrael, excuse me. So Ko Tomar, you shall say. All praise to the Most High. In this latter part, and as so I'm translating it for you here as I go. Now I got these words highlighted for a reason. The Elohim El Moshe, right? That is Elohim saying to Moshe, right? Go ahead, Mercy. I see your hand. Go ahead, Akoti.
Can I go back to verse 22 or when you finish?
Yeah, let's finish this first and then we'll go back to 22. So this is Wayomer od Elohim el Moshe ben Tomar el Bene Yisrael, right? Excuse me, that's Ko Tomar. I said Ben, that's Ko Tomar. That's not a Ben, that's a Ko, Kaf. Then it says Yahuwah Elohe Abotekem, Elohe Abraham, Elohe Yitzchak, Elohe Yaakov. So he's saying Yahuwah, Elohe, the El of your fathers, Abotekem, Elohe, the Elohim of Abraham, Elohe Yitzchak, the Elohim of Isaac, Elohe Yaakov, the Elohim of Jacob. Shalakah has sent me to you. Well, this is actually supposed to be one word. Shalakani has sent me to you. Now, this is Alakem. This is sent me to you. So this right here, let me use my pointer. Here we go. This right here is actually one word. Shalakani. That's a noon and a yod. And that is Alakem. Alechem, right? To you all or to you. And it says Ze Shmi. Now this is where I want you to see. Ze meaning this. This is Ze Shmi. Shmi is my name. That's how you say my name. Ze Shmi Le'olam. This is my name forever. He gave us his name right here. Yahuwah, Elohim of your fathers, Elohim of Abraham, Elohim of Isaac, Elohim of Yaakov, has sent me to you. Right? Shalakani Elekem Ze Shmi. This is my name, Leolam, forever. And then it says, Ve Owe Zikri, my memorial. This is my memorial, my remembrance. Zekri, right? Ve Ze Zekri. And this is my memorial, Zekri. Le Dor. That means forever. That means to all generations. This is my name, Le Dor. Right? Dor is generations. Whenever you see something put together like that in the Hebrew, back to back, and this is a prefix, the lamed on front of it, it says two generations. So it's saying to all generations. So this is where his name is given in verse 15. Verse 14 is where we get him. It's like he's describing his nature in a sense, right? I'm the Most High. You can't box me in. I'm whatever I choose to be in that regard, right? I am who I am. I am that which I am, right? And then he gives us his name. He says, this is my name. You tell him, this is my name. The Elohim of your father, the Elohim of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Ze Shmi Leolam. This is my name forever. Ve Ze Zikri Ledor Dor. And this is my remembrance, my memorial for all generations. Hallelujah. Akoti Kirsten, go ahead, Akoti. Let me stop sharing.
No, that was by accident.
Okay, yeah. No worries, no worries. Yes, so that's why I say, I think, and now we're gonna go into this other part because we're talking about a slave, right? And then with this, and then we can finish up. I'll share my screen. We go into verse 15 because Moshe got this assignment, right? Now I want to show you something. What happens in verse 14? We just go right back to the word. We go back to the Torah portion as I'm led to, because this is the last two chapters, pretty much. Moshe answered and said, if they do not believe me nor listen to my voice and say, Yahuwah has not appeared to you, and Yahuwah said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a rod. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground and it became a serpent, and Moshe fled from it. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, reach out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he reached out his hand and took hold of it, and it became a rod in his hand. So that they believed that Yahuwah, Elohim of their fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Yaakov has appeared to you. And Yahuwah said to him again, now put your hand in your bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out and see, his hand was leprous. And he said, put your hand in your bosom again. So he put his hand in his bosom again, and he drew it out of his bosom, and see, it was restored like the other flesh. Anybody catch something in this? He said, put your hand in your bosom.
Yes.
He took it out, it would look different. It was leprous. It said like snow. So we gave us a color right there too. Oh, okay. Let's keep going. Let me keep going. All right. So it looks like Moshe was melanated. Okay, let's keep going. And it shall be, if they do not believe you nor listen to the voice of the first sign, they shall believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall be, if they do not believe even in these two signs or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on the dry land, and the water which you take from the river shall become blood on the dry land. Moshe said to Yahuwah, O Yahuwah, I am not a man of words, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And Yahuwah said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes dumb or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, Yahuwah? And now go, and I shall be with your mouth and teach you what to say. But he said, O Yahuwah, please send by the hand of him whom you would send. And the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Moshe. And the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Moshe, and he said, is not Aharon the Levite, your brother? I know that he speaks well, and see, he is also coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, he shall be glad in his heart. And you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I am with your mouth and with his mouth, and I shall teach you what to do. And he shall speak for you to the people. Pay attention to what happened here. Who is doing the speaking? It says, he shall speak for you to the people, and it shall be that he shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be an Elohim for him. That's like a judge, or even like a lowercase g saying like a God to him. And take this rod in your hand, and with which you shall do the signs. Then Moshe went and returned to Yether. His father-in-law said to him, please let me go and return to my brothers who are in Mizraim to see whether they are still alive. And Yethro said to Moshe, go in peace. And Yahuwah said to Moshe and Midian, go return to Mizraim, for all the men are dead who sought your life. Somebody let Maury run in the room. I got it. So
It's
Moshe,
not, pardon me, Maury. I've been letting everybody in. They haven't been letting them in. Yeah, I've been letting everyone in.
I got it. He's in. It's all good. No worries. So Moshe took his wife and his sons and set them on a donkey, and he returned to the land of Mizraim, and Moshe took the rod of Elohim in his hand. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, as you go back to Mizraim, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in your hand, but I'm going to strengthen his heart so that he does not let the people go. Now check this out. I'm going to come back. Remind me, somebody, to come back to this word right here. All right? Because I want to show you something about this. Verse 22, you shall say to Pharaoh, thus said Yahuwah, Yisrael is my firstborn, my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go to serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, see, I am killing your son, your firstborn. And he came to be on the way in the lodging place that Yahuwah met him and sought to kill him. And Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and threw it at his feet and said, you are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him go. Then she said, you are a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. And Yahuwah said to Aharon, go meet Moshe in the wilderness. And he went and met him on the mountain of Elohim and kissed him. Moshe then told Aharon all the words of Yahuwah, who had sent him, and all the signs which he had commanded him. Now, I'm going to stop right here because I want to go to chapter 5, where we're going to close. But I wanted to go back to this. I want to show you something real quick before I leave this chapter. Moshe went with Aharon and gathered together all the elders of Israel, and this is what they told him, what had been the Most High had told him, right? So Aharon spoke all the words which Yahuwah had spoken to Moshe. Then he did the signs before the eyes of the people. The people believed. They heard that Yahuwah had visited the children of Israel and that he had looked on their affliction, and they bowed their heads and did obeisance. Now, I'm going to show you this word that I want to show you this word in verse 21. I'm going to show you this word because my elder brought this out to me years ago, and I want to bring this out. I just seen your comment, Coach Dina. No, Charleston Heston was not the color of Moshe. Just bring that out. Not my words. The Bible says that when he took his hand out, it was like snow. Then he put it back in. It changed and became back like the rest of his flesh. Now I'm going to show you this word in chapter 4, verse 21. And this is a concept because we see something, right? You can cry out to the Most High. He hears the cries of his children. He visits his children. We even went and saw this in Genesis, Better Sheep, where the cry had come up against that land so strongly that the father came down. He says, let me go see about this. And then he destroyed that land, right? And he told Abraham what he was going to do. Now, we see in the case of Israel, when their cry came up to him, he came to visit that land. Now, in verse 21, the word right here for strengthen, it will translate this on some verses, Bibles, as harden. All right. The concept of this word, the word is kazak, by the way. But the construct of this word is to strengthen or prevail or harden or be strong or become strong. It's also saying to, it's like to strengthen oneself, right? Or prevail, right? So when you look at this word, it also means grow firm or strong or strengthen. When you check this word out, it also means to tie fast or to bind or bond strongly. All right, so when you check this word out, when it says that the Most High hardened his heart, it's not that the Most High hardened Pharaoh's heart. He allowed what was already in Pharaoh to freely rise up to the top and manifest. There's a passage in the New Testament that talks about there's a time period where the Most High gives a person over to a reprobate mind. If a person is bent on being a certain way, the Most High is not going to force a person to do things his way. This is where he gives us all a choice. He's not going to force us. He will command us and instruct us, but we have to make a choice. That's why you see in the New Testament when Paul is writing about that, where people are given over to a reprobate mind, that's people being bent on being a certain way. At one point, it's like the Most High take his hands off. He says, okay, you want to run out from under my covering? You can go ahead. This is the same concept in the way this word is used when it's talking about Pharaoh. It's not that he hardened Pharaoh's heart. He allowed what was already in Pharaoh to manifest freely. That's why you see certain translations with this word. Some going to say harden, some going to say strengthen, because the word is kazak and it means to grow strong. But this is talking about in this context, what is in Pharaoh is allowed to rise up and become and manifest in Pharaoh. So people see this sometimes and they might think, well, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Like, no, the Most High didn't make Pharaoh hard. Pharaoh already had something in him Remember this Pharaoh, what this Pharaoh was doing, right? They was scared of the Israelites. They was like, nah, we scared of them. What if they start fighting with our enemies? So this man was operating with fear. We see that, right? And the father allowed what was in him because he started to implement certain tasks. We're gonna see this in the next chapter before we close out. But he started to implement certain tasks and even made it harder on the people. What was in this man was already in this man, and the Most High allowed it to come to fruition. He had because obviously the Most High in his sovereign wisdom, he has a plan. Everything he does is intentional. So if this man was bent on being a certain way, he allowed him to be that way, and it obviously is nothing's gonna stop the plan of the Most High. Hopefully that makes sense because you probably heard that before, where it's talked about how he hardened his heart. But that is not the case. We see that in English, but that's not exactly what happened in the Hebrew understanding, in the scrolls, the way it's written. Go ahead, Aki Daniel.
All right, Moray, you got to help me. Okay, this is my position. When going back to as it is probably considered that Israel were slaves. I'm saying they were treated as slaves. According to the culture, they were not slaves, but they were treated as. Okay, and this is what I mean by that. When they came into Mitzrayim, remember there was a robe given unto Yaakov. They were treated as royalty, right? And at that point, they had their own land and they had the best of everything. They were given a portion. And so over time, once the Pharaoh that was there was gone, and the power of changes, and this is coming out of the cultural study background Bible, the power structure was changing in Mizraim. A Pharaoh came in that did not respect the Elohim of Yasharel or the previous Melech of Yosef. He had to hear of Yosef. There's no way he didn't know. He probably was. He didn't know Joseph, but he had to hear of him. He had to know. It had to be in the records. Had to be in the archives. So I'm saying that Yasharel was mistreated and then treated as slaves. I believe in the culture, being a slave is a class of people, not just like Jeremiah said. Are we am I a homeborn slave? I mean, because of the way they were being treated as a class of people at the time. And so I believe my position is this, that Yasharel was known for being a mighty people, but after a while, their royalty wasn't respected, and that's because their God wasn't respected, and their previous leader wasn't respected anymore. Am I making sense?
No, I agree with what you said. The reason I say I won't say that they weren't slaves is because technically the prophecy says that they will be slaves. It actually said they're going to be. It says if you want to look at it in Ibrit, it says in Bereshit 15 and 13. He said, Abraham, know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that's not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Now, if you look at the ESV Bible, before you even look at the Ibrit, if you're just looking at it in English, TS 2009 has strangers there, and the ESV has the word servants there, right? And the KJV, I'm pretty sure they got slaves there in verse 13. And yes, they have, no, they actually, this KJV, they have stranger there. Now, but it does say that they're going to serve and they're going to be afflicted. Now, there's another version. Hold on, because I'm trying to, I go to Bible Gateway right quick, because Bible Gateway put this verse in every English translation for me. And I just want to see how they, before I even go to the Ibrit, I go back to the prophecy given to Abraham first. And the reason, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this, because the reason I say it in the way I say it is that I can't not call them slaves, is because regardless of how we want to class it, technically the prophecy says, and that's why I can't, the AMPC got slaves there, you got slaves in all kind of other translations. Now, because it's talking about their oppression. So if we examine this verse even though we might not want to call it slaves, chattel slavery might look different for different kingdoms, but it's still, they're oppressing people. But we know that the Israelites lived in Goshen. but they worked for the Israel. They worked for the Egyptians, but they lived in Goshen. But they worked for the Egyptians, and the Egyptians had the economic power in that regard. So that was a form of slavery or oppression in that sense. That's why I say I won't say that they weren't slaves, because I think if we get into them saying that they weren't slaves, it could get into another kind of discussion and say, well, technically they was living good, or they was fine. They just was working for the Egyptians, and before you know it, slavery goes away altogether.
I got you. Yeah, those semantics would lead someone down a rabbit hole that would lead them into error. I get what you're saying there, Moray. Toda.
But with all that said, I do understand where you and Dr. Grant coming from. Like I do. I think, and in our modern understanding, we might think of slavery as something different. But obviously, that's why I brought out verse 22. It looked like obviously they had some Egyptians working for them too, like they was working with them. Like, hey, you work in my house type deal. So we obviously see that they were in a certain condition. But that's why I want to read chapter 5 in Better Sheet, which I think is going to give us some, because I do understand where y'all coming from. But let me pull up chapter 5, and then we'll close out after this. So you'll see what they talk about with Moshe and Aharon. They're going to talk to him. The people going to go talk to Moshe and Aharon. It says, afterwards, Moshe and Aharon went in and said to Pharaoh, we'll close out after this chapter. It says, thus said Yahuwah, Elohim of Yisrael, let my people go so that they celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness. Now, this is what they said to Pharaoh. Thus said Yahuwah, Elohim of Yasharal, let my people go so that they celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness. Pharaoh said, who is Yahuwah, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know Yahuwah, nor am I going to let Israel go. They said, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to slaughter or make an offering of sacrifice to Yahuwah, our Elohim, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with a sword. But the sovereign of Israel said to them, Moshe and Aharon, why do you take the people from their work? Get back to your burdens. All right, now look at how the king talking to him. He says, why you take the people from their work? Get back to your burdens, right? To your burdens. Get back to what we obviously, I guess they had an agreement to do between the Israelites and the Egyptians, right? Because they had set taskmasters over them. So let's keep reading. Pharaoh said, see, the people of the land are many. Now you make them cease from their burdens. So he's acknowledging that it's a lot of y'all. The same day Pharaoh commanded the slave drivers of the people and their foremen, saying, you are no longer to give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. Lay on them the required amount of bricks, which they made before. Do not diminish it. So don't take the number down. Keep the number where it is, but let them go get their own straw. For they are idle, and this is why they cry out, saying, let us go and slaughter to our Elohim. They didn't got too idle. We need this. They need more work to do. I'm gonna make this relatable in today's world. That's why they trying to keep us distracted. Now they start focusing on their God. Now they start really not realizing that they are the people of Yahuwah Almighty. Now we need to keep them distracted. Give them some more gadgets. Give them some more streaming networks. Give them some more subscriptions to this. Let's do this. Let's make weed legal. Let's do all of these. Now we can't get them. If they start focusing on the Elohim, we in trouble. Come on, somebody. Deuteronomy 30, it said that when we turn back, why we in these lands that we've been scattered to? When we turn back, it said the Most High gonna end our captivity. The oppressor fears this. I just leave that right there. You say lie on that in your own time, but you see the same thing going on here in Egypt. Hallelujah. Let's keep going. It says, let more work be laid on the men so that they labor in it and not pay attention to the words of falsehood. He called them words of falsehood. Do y'all know that the work week used to be, anybody know, ever seen it? I got to stop right here for a moment because I want to show you something. Look at this. He cites that the people are idle. And he cites that because the people are idle, they're trying to focus on their relationship with the Most High. That means trouble for Egypt if they do that. That means that these people are going to recognize who they are, the royalty that they are, the position that they're supposed to be in, and they're not going to be with us anymore. They're going to leave us. We can't subject them anymore. Do y'all know, if you ever seen the documentary called The Corporation, you look up the history of this if you want to. The work week used to, this 40-hour work week is a new concept. I hope y'all understand that. It used to be 3 days, if I remember correctly. Then it went to 4 days a week. Then it went to like 5 days a week. You can look up this in your own time. Look at the evolution of the work week. It used to be more family oriented. People spent more time with their families than they did, or it was family oriented. I'll just say it like that. And then industry, quote unquote, industry happened, and these people saw they could make a lot of money. We need to keep these people in the office. We need to keep these people distracted, because when people get distracted, when people are not focused on doing tasks, so to speak, for a taskmaster, their creative expression is now they're able to express that. They're able to be who they're supposed to be. They get spiritually enlightened, if you understand what I mean, because they're not busied by the things of the world, trying to make ends meet. Let me keep going. That was a side note. I just felt like calling it out. Look at what he calls out though. They paying attention to these words. Let's put more work on them. And the slave drivers of the people and their foremen went out and spoke to the people, saying, "Thus said Pharaoh, I do not give you straw. Go take straw for yourselves wherever you find it, for your work shall not be diminished." And the people were scattered in all the land of Mizraim to gather stubble for straw. Now they're going to look for straw. And the slave drivers were hurrying them on, saying, "Fulfill your actions. Your daily matters is when there was straw." Also the foremen of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over them, were struck and were asked, "Why have you not fulfilled your law in making bricks, both yesterday and today as before?" All right. The foremen of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over them. So the children of Israel had foremen in watching them do their work. They were struck and were asked, "Why have you not fulfilled your law in making bricks both yesterday and today as before?" It looks like here, that's why I say, let me go to verse 14 in the Ibrit right quick, because I want to see something myself to see what this word is for here in the book of Exodus chapter 5. If they were physically struck, it looks like the men were physically struck here in verse 14. Okay, it says beaten. That is correct. So these men actually took a punishment. They were struck for Israelites. They were Israelites who were tasked with watching over them to get their work done, and these men took licks. It said they took a beating, and that's exactly what the word means: to smite, slay, kill, beat. So these men were actually struck by Pharaoh's taskmasters. So let's slide back over here. So it said they struck them. Now the foremen of the children, after they took this beating, they came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, "Why do you treat your servants this way? There is no straw given to your servants. And they say to us, make bricks. And see, your servants are struck, but your own people are at fault. They didn't give us the straw. Now you beating us?" But he said, "You are idle. You are idle. That is why you say, let us go make an offering or slaughter to Yahuwah. So now go work, and straw is not given to you, but deliver the amount of bricks." And the foremen of the children of Israel saw that they were in trouble after it was said, "You are not to diminish your daily amount of bricks." Now this relationship between Israel and Egypt, it looked like it is a different form. This looks like a type of, you could classify this as a chattel slavery.
No doubt.
So, so it might, the relationship may have evolved to your point, Aki, over time. And now they're at a point where this guy, this new Pharaoh, he just don't want to recognize that, okay, these Israelites they helped us out. Joseph back in the day, he on something different, because Joseph and all his brothers died. And so it was like, now this guy, he coming, so he looking at the records, but he the new kid on the block, so to speak. So he trying to do things his way. Now these people, it said he was scared of them. They was all over the land. And then it said verse 20. Now look at what they're gonna say to Moshe and Aaron. When they came out from Pharaoh, they met Moshe and Aaron, who stood there to meet them. And they said to them, "Let Yahuwah look on you and judge, because you have made us loathsome in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to give a sword into their hand to kill us." And Moshe returned to Yahuwah and said, "Yahuwah, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you send me? For ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all." And the last verse of this is verse 1 in chapter 6. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Now see what I do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he is going to let them go, and with a strong hand he is going to drive them out of his land. So it looked like this relationship over time. It looked like at one point Israel and the Egyptians were cohabitating together in the land. In the time of Yosef, we see things were going good. Yosef is obviously a leader. He brings his family down. They began to multiply. They outnumber the Israelites. So much so to now, when we get in the beginning of the book of Exodus, this new king is afraid of the Israelites. He is trying to destroy the babies. He is commanding the little boys to be killed. So yeah, that relationship now had become, you can definitely classify that as chattel slavery. They now oppressing them and even killing them. So even in verse, when the Moshe heard from the Most High told him, he said, the people's cried and came up to me. So they was experiencing this even before he sent him to talk to Pharaoh. Even before he was called, that cry had come up. So, but yeah, but you can imagine the hardship in this time, Ishbakar, of what the people were going through. This is a hard time. Our people went through some stuff. We went through some stuff then. We went through some stuff in this country. We are a resilient people. But one thing I want us to see, or one of the things that I want us to see out of this, is that when we cry out to the Most High, he answers us. He comes to see about his children.
Hallelujah.
He come check on us. He come deliver us. He has done this time and time and time throughout history. So this is what one of the things I want us to focus on when we do read this Torah portion, right? How can we apply that to our personal lives? What are you going through right now where you're in need of the Father to come in? Whether it's financial, whether it's familial, whether it's a relationship, a marriage, a health issue. What are you going through right now? Abba showing us that, man, Abba shows us that he answers when his children cry out to him in sincerity and truth. Your cry reaches his throne, and then it moves him in a sense to where he is now going to send his messengers to handle your situation. You have now been, it's an assignment on your assigned word to your situation. And we know, can't nothing stop his word. So I wanted to bring,
Roy, oh,
yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out we are truly a spiritually, mentally, and physically strong people. I took something off of Facebook the other day. I just didn't think people were ready to stomach it. But they showed just a handful of chains and a chain ring that goes around the neck of what our ancestors were dealing with in West Africa before getting on a ship. And the guy lifted it up, and he was struggling to hold it, just up maybe 2 feet of the chain with the neck ring. And he was saying how heavy it was, and they showed the chains that they had on the children, and these are chains from the 1700s. So we know that some of it has rusted away. It's not at its full strength, and some of the things that they had hanging on our ancestors' lips. And so I just want to point out part of the mental enslavement is to teach us that we're lazy, shiftless, whatever people, but no, we're very strong spiritually, mentally, and physically. And I yield.
Torah, Aki. That's one of the things I quote too. I appreciate you bringing that out because I like to quote what Eshan said in one of his songs. He says, "Black people, you are not the lesser of mankind. You have an oppressor who profits from you staying blind. If he can keep us blind, if the enemy can keep us distracted, if he can keep us giving our energy to other things instead of to Elohim, then he can keep us in an oppressed position because we are allowing him to." Come on, somebody. But you royalty. Hallelujah. All praise to the Most High. I'm almost done. I'm gonna slide to the presentation and then I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop after this. I'm gonna go over here to this slide and I'll show you something about the name real quick. Excuse me. So some important notes on the name, and then I'm gonna close out. The Masoretes, you've probably seen this slide before because I have it earlier in the presentation, but I want to show you something. I'm going to put some additional notes on this. Masoretes are who is credited with removing the Father's name from the Bible, right? They also developed the Nikud system. So when you see on this slide right here, all these little characters under the letters, that was not there in the original Hebrew or the original Hebrew. That was added by the Masoretes. That's the Nikud system. It's supposed to aid with pronunciation. Now, they give you a reason as to why they took the Father's name out, because the Father's name was, they said, was regarded as too sacred to be uttered. But when we see the book, throughout the book, it's all about praising his name from cover to cover. The Most High will not tell us to praise his name and then hide his name from us. Think about that. This is where we got to be logical, right? Let's keep going. Latin-speaking Christian scholars, this is later, they substituted the Y, which does not exist in Latin, by the way, with an I or a J. Now, the J exists in Latin as a variant form of the letter I. I'll explain this in a moment. So the Tetragrammaton became the artificial Latinized name Jehovah. That's where you get that name from. Now, you can fact check me on all of this, by the way. There was no J in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, or Aramaic. Like I mentioned, the J in the Latin, it was existed as a variant form of an I. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. The letter J is new. It comes from the letter I, which had a Y sound. The J was introduced into English between 1600 and 1640. It was the last letter added to the English alphabet. Not the letter Z, by the way. It was the letter J. It was considered a fancier way of writing the letter I. They would call this a swash. When you write a I, put a little swoop at the end of it, they would call that a swash. When the lowercase i's were used as numerals, the lowercase j, which was a swash, marked the end of a series of ones. So as in the number 13 in Roman numerals, XIII, that's 13, right? X being 10, the I being 1. You add them up, that's 13. They would write XIIJ. So that way you could say, they was telling that person that that's the last number in this series or whatever it is, a series of ones. So knowing this, that there was no J in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, or Aramaic, we know that he couldn't have been called Jehovah. We know that the Messiah couldn't have been called Jesus. Now, granted, this is education. This is not to knock anybody, right? So if a person is listening to this or they hear this later, this is not what this is. This is stuff that you can look up yourself to go and get a deeper understanding of why it is you believe what you believe today and why it is you say what you say today. You came into the realm in the 1900s. Many of you that are probably listening to this, and some of you were born in the 2000s, right? You came into this realm at a certain time. There was a lot of history that occurred before you that you have no idea about. Why do you celebrate the days that you celebrate? Why do you do the things that you do in the culture that you live in? Why do you dress the way that you dress, right? All this has been passed down. So we have to unlearn so we can relearn. Question. Don't live as a skeptic. You make observations and you ask righteous questions. It's not paranoia. It's not living as a skeptic. You should be on the path to search for truth. You should be trying to find truth, right? Because the truth, like Messiah said, is going to make you free. We've been living in deception. We live in a world that's drenched in idolatry and deception, period. They got us celebrating days that are not even in the Bible, and they tell us that they are about the Bible. Make it make sense. It don't make sense when there are days in the Bible that we don't even celebrate. They don't even talk to us. Matter of fact, they don't even tell us to celebrate them. They tell us that they are done away with. You no longer have to celebrate those days anymore. But when you read the text, it says, Olam, forever. You keep these appointments forever. Now you got to start like, wait a minute, y'all, wait. We live in a world that's in a delusion. I just told you that they got us celebrating days that are not in the Bible, but they tell us that they are about the Bible. But we don't celebrate the days that are in the Bible. Yeah, the math ain't mathing, like they say, right? It don't add up. That's when you pull out. You say, wait a minute, time out. Hit the drone button and go above. Get out of the forest. Get out of the trees so you can see the forest. Take a step back. Wait a minute. What are we doing? What are we doing? You should question the whole culture, all of it. And let the Most High give you his lenses and perspective on the way that you're supposed to see and view everything. That's when you have true freedom. When it don't matter to you what that person think about you. It only matters to you what the Most High thinks about you. You aiming to please him, not the person, not people, not man, not woman. You aiming to please him, the creator of man and woman. You want to please him, the creator of all things. Hallelujah. Yahuwah. When you favor with Elohim is favor with man. You get the vertical relationship right, he gonna take care of everything else. Trust me on that. He gonna take care of your lateral relationship, your horizontal relationship, your relationships on this plane that we call earth. He'll take care of those. Get that relationship right with him first. Everything else gonna fall into place. Everything else, I don't even want to say fall into place. Everything else gonna get into place when you get your relationship right with him. Say loud on that. Question everything. This is not I bring this out because these are facts that some people may not know about, may not have thought about. They may not have seen these types of things, right? Like I said, we know the Father's name is not Jehovah. I just gave you some step-by-step method whereby you can make that conclusion by yourself, right? And the Messiah's name could not have been Jesus even during his time on earth. By the way, if you go to the 1611 King James Bible, there were no J's in the original KJV 1611. And I told you before that the original, the I had a Y sound. Do your research, Mr. Bakar. That's what I'm saying. We live in a place of that is drenched in delusion, by the way. Lastly, before I close on this, the first three letters of the Messiah's name are Yod, He, and a Wah, which is a contraction of the Father's name. I talked about this before. The E sound comes from vowel pointing that was added by the Masoretes and not in the original scriptures. If you ever hear an Ish person say the name of the Father, they will say it with an E sound, like a Yehovah. They'll say it in a different way. And it's actually, they say it in a different way. I say it like that. It's like they say Yehovah or something along those lines. But I'm telling you, when you dig into this, you'll see that that E sound that actually came through vowel pointing when it was added by the Masoretes. Not in not in the original scriptures, from my understanding. The Vav is considered as a V, a W, or a U. Now, anybody see any relationship between them three letters? A V, a W, or a U?
Fine.
The V had a U sound in the KJV 1611. The W had a double OO sound, double U sound. Thus, we pronounce the Vav as a double U. The U has the U sound as well. All of this stuff, you can fact check me on all of this, Mr. Bakar. You can read this in your own time. You can do your own research on this. But it's interesting when cultures get to changing people's language. You start to when a group changes another group's language. When we came over here when we were brought over here, rather, some of us came over here and some of us were brought over here. There's a difference. But when you get a group of another group oppressing another group, they start to strip you of your language, which strips you of your culture, which strips you of your purpose, will strip you of your meaning. You don't even know why you. I told you before that I've been able to trace back 6 generations in my family on my maternal patrilineal side and on my patrilineal side through my father, right? And I'm going further. All praise to the Most High. Yet you have a group of people here that can trace back 3 times as much as that. You know, some of them. They can go back to an actual land that they came from through their ancestral records, right? But why can't the black man do that? The black woman do that? When you don't have, like, just like what Marcus Garvey said though, right? When it's like a tree without roots. When you don't know where you come from, you get off into all kind of stuff. You start looking for meaning and purpose in all kind of stuff, cultures, religions, things. You start trying to find enlightenment and you start trying to find meaning and purpose for your being on this planet and other stuff that ain't got nothing to do with the Most High. Totally against or absent of your real purpose. Hopefully I'm making sense. But with that, Mishpakai, I'm gonna slide to the last slide, a couple of slides that I got. We read chapter 4 and 5, and also we read chapter 6, the first verse. We'll pick back up on this as Allah leads me to. And the Haftarah was Isaiah. Now, I'll quickly give you this. I got it in one paragraph here. In these passages, you will see that it's prophecy that Israel will blossom and bud. We see them blossoming in Egypt, right? Before they started to get into this oppressed situation, we see them, they were blossoming, they were budding, they were thriving. They shall fill the face of the world with fruit. It says they was all over the land of Egypt. It is prophecy that they will be gathered, and the outcasts in the land of Egypt shall come and shall worship Yahuwah Almighty on the set apart mountain in Jerusalem. So we see in Egypt, they were being gathered to go and worship the Most High at his mount, make a covenant with him and make a sacrifice to him at his mountain. We see the connection with the Most High taking his people Israel from the land of Egypt. They were to go into the wilderness to worship him, where we know they eventually did and entered into a covenant with him at Mount Sinai. It is also prophesied in these chapters in Isaiah that they would stumble backwards, not wholeheartedly receiving the word of Elohim, which we know that they did. And it is also prophecy that they will return back to him, which we know that they are doing now and will do. All praise to the Most High. The last place was in the Besorah, and this is in chapter 2, 1 through 12. In this chapter, we see the birth of Mashiach. Excuse me. Yahusha Hamashiach. And the Magi came to Jerusalem looking for him. Herodes, who was an Edomite, by the way, he was on the throne in Jerusalem at that time. That's a whole nother discussion that I can get into about that, how he was even on the throne. Then you have, because he's an Edomite, right? But you know, we're under Roman captivity at this point. Also, by the way, the Romans are in control, and we're paying taxes to the Romans at this point because Jerusalem had already been besieged. It just hadn't been sacked yet. So even during the time of Messiah, they were paying taxes to the Romans. There's a reason for this. Remember when he said, go get the fish out of the water, and in his mouth, you're going to find a coin? Do that to pay the tax. Use that to pay the tax. So based on the prophecy that he had heard from the chief priests and the scribes, Herodes sent the Magi to Bethlehem. Deceitfully, he sent them and told them to search diligently for the Messiah and to let him know when they found him, because he was saying he was going to go worship him too. The Magi went forth, and the star which they had seen in the east went before them until they came and stood where the Messiah was. When they came to the house, they saw the child who was Messiah with Miriam, his mother, and they fell down and did reverence to him, and then they opened their treasures and they presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, they were warned in a dream not to go back because Herodes, and they departed for their own country in the east by another way, because they had came from the east, it said. Herodes later realized that he was fooled by the Magi, and he issued a decree to slay all the male children in Bethlehem and in all its borders from 2 years old and under. So here we see another fearful ruler who feared the Israelites, and a similar decree was issued by Pharaoh in Egypt. So now you see the connection between all of these passages. But you, Bethlehem, this is the prophecy. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Yahudah, you are by no means least among the rulers of Yahudah, for out of you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people, Yasharal. Hallelujah. All praise we give unto the Most High, Mishpakai. I know we went long today, and I was trying to get into the lesson. I called myself trying to get into the lesson a lot quicker. But I saw two hands. I'm gonna go to Asharya, and then I'm gonna go to Iwa. Go ahead, Akoti.
Okay, I had two questions. You touched on one of them briefly. It was where the letter E came from. And
Mm-hmm.
my second question, since we're in the book of Shemot names, I had put it in the chat hoping that somebody would give me some more insight on that. It was with regards to Masha. Since Masha was named by an Egyptian princess, did he have another name?
Now that's a good question. First, I'll start with his name. When it says that he was named in chapter 3, no, chapter 2 of Exodus is where we see Moshe named. Yes. Chapter 2, I don't know if he had another name. I'm not aware of him having another name, but it says the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moshe, saying, because I have drawn him out of the water. Now, we know there was some intermingling between the two cultures back then. We can assume that. I feel like that's a reasonable thing to assume when two people are living in a land like that, close proximity for hundreds of years, for centuries. You can assume that, right? Even the people that made the golden calf, when they came out of Egypt, you got to ask yourself why they make a golden calf. Well, if you go back to Egypt, you will see that that was a practice that they actually learned in Egypt, and they specifically made the gold into a calf. So that was something that they had learned in Egypt. So I wouldn't say that. I don't know if he had another name. Now that's a good question, Akoti. Masha or Moshe or Moses, however you want to pronounce his name. As far as the letter E, now I know the E sound that we know. From my understanding, it came later on one of my teachers that is like the long E sound. I mean the E sound. Excuse me. From my understanding, it came from. It's a later. The phonetic or the pronunciation of it is a later development when it comes to the Hebrew language, the pronunciation of the E, not necessarily the letter E, but the pronunciation of the letter E as it regard the Hebrew language, in the Hebrew language. From my understanding, that sound came later. Now, again, I haven't researched the E thoroughly, so I'm just going off the way I've been taught in regard to it being a part of Hebrew. Now, I will say this, because I do have a chart in this presentation, as a matter of fact. I'm pulling it up now just to make sure I got that, because I got the E on there. Here we go. So the E, when you relate the E in the Greek to, it was related to what they call the hey, right? Now, obviously, we know those are two different sounds in the Hebrew, and then you get into the Latin. But in the Hebrew language, the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, the first 5 letters of the old Hebrew Aleph, Bet, and the first 5 letters of the original Greek alphabet, they are the same letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Over time, now the writing direction was different and the reading direction was different. Greek is left to right. Hebrew is right to left. Over time, the Greek language changed to the A, B, C, D, E characters that we see now. Although they had different names, but you see the letters change, their forms changed. I guess I'll show you this. I got this slide up, so I'll just show you this slide. In the last, whenever it pops up, I'm just waiting on it to pop up. This is it right here. So you should see this. The Greek alphabet over centuries evolved into these modern Greek forms, what we see right here. The modern Roman alphabet is, the English alphabet, is Roman, because this is the modern Roman alphabet. We see the A, B, C, D, E. The English alphabet that we speak is Roman. The Romans adopted the Greek alphabet. So we're able to see our own modern English alphabet in these ancient Hebrew turned Greek letters, the A through the E. Now, how this began to be pronounced, that might be a little different of a story. I don't know, but I know from what I understand, the actual eh or the E sound, from my understanding, came later. It was not a part of the original ancient Hebrew Aleph Bet. And this is the chart I was saying where they show the ancient Shemitic Hebrew and the corresponding letters in Greek and Latin, as well as the modern Hebrew. So this chart is actually available.
I have that start.
No, but that's a great question. And about Moshe's name, that I don't know. I don't know if he had another name. The only name I know is Moshe.
So Maury, if E is a Roman character, why do we spell the name Elohim with an E? And if I is not in the original Ibrit alphabet, why do we use the letter I?
So the aleph is what you use to spell Elohim with. Sometimes I say, if you notice, I don't know if some of y'all notices, I will say al instead of el, or I'll say
Right.
Elohim. Yeah. So that's my own understanding of that too. So I stopped doing that. I do that sometimes, and I try to. Y'all have heard me say that mostly on the calls where I say Elohim or al. I'll say it like that because that's my understanding of it now since it's grown. But there are times where I do say Elohim or El as well. It just depends on maybe who I'm talking to or maybe what I'm saying in that moment or just, how I'm speaking in that moment. But yeah, my understanding of it is indeed is an aleph. It's an aleph there. Same thing when we say, so the E sound, like that I sound, um, I don't know if the I sound was a part of the original or not, but I know you can pronounce certain sounds in a language. Like the Greeks, I'll go back to this. The Greeks did not have a SH sound. They didn't have a sh sound in their language. Now, that doesn't mean that people couldn't put their lips together and say sh, but they didn't have that. They had the sigma sound, which was an S sound. So they pronounced the Messiah's name as Jesus, right? Instead of, or they say Jesus, instead of saying Yeshua or Yahusha, right? So languages, I don't know about the I sound. I don't want to get too deep into that because I'm not a linguist in that regard. But uh, but that's a good question. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Con. That's why I say that it's interesting when you study language, the differences you see, and the similarities you see too. Not just differences. You see some similarities in languages as well. But I'm not a linguist, so don't quote me, Mr. Pakai. You can fact check me on the other stuff that I was presenting, but I don't know about the I sound and the E sound. From my understanding, the way it's pronounced in modern Hebrew was not originally there in the ancient Hebrew, and that's the way I've been taught by the one who taught me the language, and he's certified actually by the Upan Ibrit Institute, from my understanding. Well, he's certified to teach the language from the country or the land of Israel. So I took his course, textbook, everything, and that was where I got that understanding from. The original E sound that was not in the original Hebrew language. The I sound, I don't know. Akoti Iwa, I saw your hand earlier. Go ahead.
Yes, I just have a question from Bereshit 28. I wanted to wait until you were finished to go back, but I just wanted to know if this was custom or not based on these two different scenarios. So in 38, where it says in verse 8, and Yehuda said to Onan, go in to your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, and it came to be when he went into his brother's wife that he spilt on the ground, lest he should give an offspring to his brother. But what he did displeased Yah, so he took his life too. And then I was thinking also about Sarah and Raquel and Leah, how they gave their servant to their husbands to for the seed, their child that they birthed. So I was wondering, because it says that the child became theirs. So I was wondering if it's because they were servants, that's why that happened, because they were owned by Sarah and by all the others, or was it custom? Because it was also stated with Tamar and Onan.
Yes, yeah. So in that first case, like you were saying, yes, Onan He was supposed to give seed to his brother. He knew that it actually tells us in the text, he knew the seed would not be his, but it would be raised up in his brother's seed, so his brother's steed. So in that regard, that seed will belong to his brother. And it looks like it in the text, he didn't want to do that. And thus he spilled his seed. And in that regard, that displeased the Most High. So in the other case, yes, when a woman would give up a handmaid, yes, the handmaiden was the possession of the woman or the household. The man could have handmaids too. Like Laban gave his daughters the handmaids that they have, Bilpah and Zilpah. They belonged to Laban first. Then he gave them the handmaids that they have, if I'm understanding correctly what it says in the text. So, excuse me. So in that regard, yes, those seed, that's why they gave them the handmaid, because that child would be a part of their household. So it would be counted as a part of their household. So in that regard, they saw themselves being built up by letting their ish lay with the handmaid, because that would all belong to them. That would belong to her, because the handmaid was hers. So that means that the progeny from the relationship with her ish will belong to her in that regard.
So then what about like in Sarah and Hagar, excuse me, dynamic? Because I mean, he still belonged to Hagar, even though he was brought up in that same household, but wasn't he still Hagar's? I'm just trying to.
You saying wasn't Hagar, did she belong to Sarai?
No, her son. Wasn't it still her son? Because the dynamic of how it was, like what you're saying is that when they bear these children, that it becomes the possession of the one that's in charge, like for instance Sarah or Leah, who gave her handmaid to be, to have children by her husband. So my thing is, Hagar and Sarah was in the same position. However, it seemed like there was a differentiation, I guess, with Hagar's child and Sarah's, even though they were in the same household and Ishmael was brought up in the same household. I just wanted to know. I'm trying to understand this custom. It's weird. It just showed that there was like a divide between Hagar's son and Sarah's son.
Right. So there was a divide in that regard. Remember, the promise was going to come through Sarai of her own seed. I mean, from her womb and Abraham's seed. So in essence, some people might describe it as they tried to help the Most High out in some type of way. I don't know. I've heard some people say it like that before, where she was barren and she wasn't having children, so she gives him Hagar. He lays with Hagar. Hagar conceives, but the promise was not with Hagar. The promise was always with Sarai. The son of promise is going to come through Sarai. Through Abraham and Sarai coming together and becoming one, Isaac was supposed to be born. So the giving of the handmaid in this case created a different situation, because he would still be, that's why if you remember, the Most High told Abraham to go ahead and listen to his wife in that matter, where she was like, send him away from us, because I don't want him to be, because once Isaac was born, you see what I'm saying? Now you got an issue, because the son of promise is there, but he's not the firstborn if that household stays intact. If I'm making sense. So now, if that makes sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So now he had to leave. That's why he sent him away. He had to send him away, and he even told him he was going to bless him and everything, but the son of promise,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was going to go straight to Isaac.
Okay. Oh, okay. So I just wanted to know if it was custom or if it was just, okay. I see.
Now that situation is a little different. It might take a deeper dive on that one too. But I will say, the custom in the custom that you see, that does happen, where if you own a handmaid, And a person that owns a handmaid rather than they are barren, which we see in the case of Jacob, Leah, Rachel, right? We see that in that case. That means that now since they own these handmaids, which were given to them by their father, they gave them to their ish, and then whatever's born builds them up, right? Builds their household up because they're counted as part of their household. So that is a custom that you do see in the practice in scripture, for sure. You do see that. And in that case with Abraham and Sarah, that is a little different because, like I said, the promise was given 25, I think, years before Isaac was born. 25 years. Ishmael was 13 years older than Isaac.
Right.
So when that happened, now you got something going. You got a different dynamic in the household if both of the men are still there. So now Ishmael is becoming a young man. It's time for him to go. So he sent Hagar and Ishmael away, and even put a blessing on Ishmael. But the son of promise was going to be through Isaac. So that's why the Most High, if you remember, there's a place, in one of the chapters where Sarah comes to Abraham, it says, send her away, send this away from me. And he didn't want to do it at first, if you remember the text. And that's when the father told him, he says, nah, go ahead and listen to your wife in this matter. And so because technically that would have been his firstborn, right? That was the first seed propagated from him. So yeah, but that would have created all kind of issues when it came to the inheritance. And Ishmael wasn't a son of promise, Isaac was. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's a great question, though, by the way. That might require a deeper dive at a later point. Or it might be worth a deeper dive. Let me say, I ain't gonna say it might be worth it. It is worth a deeper dive at another point, but hopefully that does, suffice. So y'all been rocking today, Mr. Picard. We done went another almost 5-hour session, another one. And I wasn't even trying to do that today. But we give all praise and esteem and honor to the Most High. It's been productive, I feel like. Hopefully this has been helpful for y'all. Y'all see how these Torah portions, we did 3 again today, y'all. But do y'all see how these could literally be they could be one lesson? Like when we get into these other ones, it's probably good that I got finished with these, because when we start getting into this deeper part of Shemot, you're gonna see we probably need to spend a lot of time rather, the whole time on just one Torah portion and not skip. Like we need to stay on this one because these chapters in Shemot get deep, just like in Genesis, Bereshit. I am thinking about possibly restarting the Torah portions when the year actually starts over in the spring around Pesach. I am thinking about doing that, and that way we can do this probably a little differently. But right now, I'm just going as I'm led to. I haven't guaranteed. I'm not saying that I will start them over, but like there are some Torah portions we didn't do. We didn't start in, we just picked up where we picked up. And I was just doing the Torah portion as a part of the other parts of lessons where I was talking about something else, but I was kind of sneaking in putting in the Torah portion, but we weren't spending a lot of time on it. But as you can see, these Torah portions themselves, they could be lessons by themselves, technically. Because we can even look at how the Hatorah and the Basor connect to these in an even deeper way. Right now, I'm kind of running through them a little bit, just to be honest with you, but you can dive into this at your own time, though. All praise to the Most High. With that, Bishop Bakai, I'm gonna yield. I'm gonna let y'all get back to eating. Some of y'all have ate 2 times already. It's all good. It's a virtual gathering, so I acknowledge that there is some leniency there. You can snack and do your thing, but I have not eaten. So, but I have eaten at the same time, if you know what I mean. The word of the Most High is my food. So with that, Bishop Bakai, I'm going to pray, and then we will dismiss. Hallelujah. Father Yahuwah, we first and foremost come before you and we say, Toda Rabbah, for blessing us with another Sabbath day and allowing us to come together today and use this technology in a righteous way. Abba, we pray that your word has gone forth today and that your word takes deep root in our hearts and that your word bears much good fruit in our lives. And Father, it's all for your name's sake and for your esteem. I pray for my brothers and sisters that have been on the call today, that you will shower them with prosperity and peace, true shalom throughout this entire upcoming week, Father. As we leave this call, Abba, we do not want to leave your presence. Please, Abba, give us the healing that we need, for you know where we need to be healed. We also ask, Abba, that you give us relief where we need relief. Hallelujah. Deliver us from the evil one, where we're struggling, where we've been battling in our thoughts, in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirits. Abba, please deliver us, heal us, deliver us from the evil one, and make us whole, Abba. Deliver us and protect us and keep us from demonic strongholds and demonic attacks, Abba. Place your hedge of protection around us. Guard us in our households, and it's all for your name's sake and for your esteem. Please continue to lead us in the way everlasting and give us understanding of your word, Father. We thank you for your word. We give all esteem to you. We praise your mighty name, and we offer up this prayer to you in the name of Messiah Yahusha. We also, Father, repent our sins, and we ask for your mercy and forgiveness. In the name of Yahusha HaMashiach, we pray. We say, let your will be done. Let it be so. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yahuwah. Hallelujah.
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 Thanks for I appreciate y'all hanging in, Miss Pakai. I know it was long, but I appreciate y'all hanging in. May the Most High bless you and keep you as you go from this call today. Love you all, Miss Pakai.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you, Minister Will. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Shalom.
Shalom. Toda More.
Shalom.
Go eat.
Great week.
Shabbat.